Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the newest episode, which is book club number 4 for Wizard and Glass. I have got to remember not to say the Wastelands. I've been saying that for 27 or 26, whatever episodes it was. It's been a while, so
what, 2.5 years is what we figured out,
something like that. Yeah. But 25. It's enough where you get that habit going, and then you then it's like, oh no, shit. Like the other day, yesterday on the Patreon Hangout, I said tomorrow when we go on the next part of our Wastelands book club. Let's see. So Carol's in the chat. Welcome, Carol. Looks like she'll be working while listening. Glad that everything's okay, Carol. I know you're in Hawaii. I don't know what part of Hawaii, but there's obviously been a lot of stuff. I've definitely been hoping you're okay there. Definitely wasn't sure what island you were on. I know that's usually how people like distill Hawaii, right? It's like, which island are you on? And I actually don't know. Is the fire on the Big Island? I don't know.
It's one of the bigger islands.
They keep saying the names, but I don't know cities well enough into the islands to know where it's all at. But yeah, glad to see you, Carol. But yeah, we are here for part 4 of Wizard and Glass. Let's go ahead and hit the intro and jump on into the not announcements, but all the intro stuff on the other side here.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are content, one from many. Let the palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's magnum opus, the Dark Tower series, as well as the extended Stephen King universe, although in this episode we're pretty much only talking Dark Tower. My name is Tad.
And I'm Peter.
And we're here for part 4 of Wizard and Glass book club.
Oi.
Yeah.
Go ahead and throw one of those out right away there. Why not?
Well, we're going to take away your oi button. You threaten me every time I push it.
Yeah, I don't go overboard with it, though.
I don't know about that.
You know what I could say is, like, oi, bark if you're a menace to children.
Oi.
Stop it.
Oh, man. So let's go ahead and dive into the announcement or introduction stuff real quick. First of all, there's no spoiler warning. We do not cover spoilers on 99% of these episodes. We have a spoiler section at the very end, but you will have an audio warning as well as a screen warning if you're here on YouTube side. So if you haven't finished the 7 primary books of the Dark Tower series, these are the safe episodes for you to listen to. The roundtable episodes, we alternate back and forth. Those ones would not be safe for you if you have not finished the series because spoilers pop up often and at random.
Yeah,
so
frequently.
Yes, they're like, what does it Roland say? Like Jack out of his box. They just pop out of nowhere. So then if you want to find the podcast, you can do that on any number of ways, like Apple Podcast. You can stream us on Spotify or Stitcher. Pretty much any podcasting service, as well as now Amazon Music and Audible are also in the podcast game now. We are available on there. If you want to subscribe, rate, and review us, you can on any of those services. We'd appreciate that. It helps the algorithm gods to hopefully have more podcast listeners finding the show and joining our extended content. And if you want to join us live, like we have a few people so far, we got Carol, Josh, and Chris from Australia popping into the chat so far. But you could do if you want to do the same thing, you can do that at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. If you want to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Have we really had a shift this summer yet? We usually always have to have like one that we have to move around for like a vacation.
Didn't we move one in June?
Did we?
I thought we did.
I don't know. That was so long ago. Who could remember such things?
I could have sworn that we did.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't remember. But either way, keep up on if you want to keep up on our live streams, they're pretty regular. But every once in a while, maybe somebody will get sick or something, and we might have to move something or vacations or whatever. And if you are subscribed, you'll see notifications for our episodes.
Carol gave us an update. She said, "Thank you. I'm living in Honolulu, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. The tragic fires are on the island of Maui. Thank you for checking in with me."
Oh, okay.
So yeah, she's on a different island.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, it's definitely been a tough thing to watch.
Yeah.
Just saw some more on the news today. Pretty sad stuff.
Yeah.
And then I lost my place. Show notes over at darktowerpalaver.com. We don't have show notes for these episodes because we're just covering the book. But we have our show notes for our roundtable episodes, as well as you have links for all things Dark Tower Palaver over there. If there's something you wanted to find of ours, there is a link there for I think everything. So
merchandise, new listener survey, all our social media stuff, all of that's over there.
it's all linked over there.
Yep.
So you could go find all that over at darktowerpalaver.com. Then if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. Like I mentioned before we went live, maybe on the podcast side, that we just did a Patreon hangout yesterday, so we do those once a month. Plus, you have access to our Discord server where you can always send Peter emojis and bash on things like Saint Bernards that are evil monsters that want to eat small children named Tad. If you want to, there's a bunch of benefits like that over there. If you want to support the show, then if you want to email the show or reach out to us in any way, Peter can let you know the ways to do that.
The best way to reach us is through email. We have our old email still up and going. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. Our new email is show@darktowerpalaver.com. Ted, how's our mailbag look?
So I do have we actually have a comment from the last book club that I wanted to mention. But email wise, I don't know. We might be getting close to empty actually.
And you look at that. I'm going to go through the rest of the stuff. So our social medias is do I say Twitter or do I say X? Am I going to get in trouble if I say Twitter?
It's Twitter. It'll always be Twitter.
It's okay.
Yeah.
At Dark Tower Pod. That's at Dark Tower POD is our Twitter. Our Facebook is facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. Instagram is Dark Tower Palaver, all one word, no spaces. And then, like we mentioned before, we have our merchandise. You can go directly to our website and click on I think it's a box is the icon for that. Or you can go to tpublic.com/user/darktowerpalaver. Pick yourself up a hashtag Tad is terrible sticker t-shirt.
Slander.
Like what I'm wearing. It's not slander. It's libel if it's written down. We talked about this last time.
Slander.
It's not slander.
Also, I wanted to mention for the email side, in a fortnight from now, we will be having our roundtable, and that is the one where we are going to be doing a 10,000-foot view of, I almost said Wizard and Glass.
Went through the keyhole.
That's this book.
Yes.
Went through the keyhole. If you would like to have any kind of input on that, get those emails in, because in a fortnight we'll be discussing that for the first time ever really on the show.
That's the first time we're announcing that we're switching back. No, we're not switching back yet.
No. I'm just saying that everyone has a fortnight to get an email in if they want to chime in on Went Through the Keyhole, because we have never covered it. It came out before the podcast, and somehow we've gone this long and we've never really.
It's come up in conversation
in
here and
passing
there, but actually like. Here's what happens in this book. Like you said, a 10,000-foot view and everything like that. But again, no spoilers. We're not talking about that here.
No, not on this episode, but I want to let everyone know. So if you do want to reach out to us and be part of that conversation, do it quickly, because that is fast approaching.
Are we talking about what we discovered yesterday with our October show, or are we waiting until we have confirmation on that?
Yeah, we gotta solidify.
Okay, so if you're a Patreon,
I also don't know how to look at our comments while we're live streaming. But somebody chimed in, a new listener, I believe someone we haven't heard from at least, named April, mentioning a theory that perhaps Mr. Eddie Dean owned Charlie the Choo Choo and got too old for it, and it got given away or thrown away, or somehow ended up. It's his copy that ended up in Jake's hands from
Eddie
Towers.
lives after Jake, not before.
He would be older though, or in terms of, or would it be Henry? I guess maybe it'd be Henry's then.
It would have to be Henry's then. Like, it can't be Eddie's.
No, that's true. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, Eddie lives after Jake.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking
Jake's wandering around New York in '77 and finds an old battered copy. Eddie's like.
Yeah, but it's a pretty I think it comes down to when he falls into the mansion, because at that point there, Eddie's old enough to have gotten rid of a book like that, so it could have gotten rid of that to where Jake finds it at the.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah, because that's not one you'd probably have for 10, 12-year-old kid.
I don't have my kid books. the books that I
got
read
rid
as
of
a
them.
little kid.
Yeah, and your daughter.
My parents,
like
my parents kept them.
If you had a cutesy book like Charlie the Choo Choo for your daughter, she's 10 now. I don't know if you'd still have them unless it was like.
I still have Charlie the Choo Choo. It's not for my daughter. It's locked away in a anti-possession box. In a
like the Conjuring.
No, I actually buried it in a field.
Oh, it'll be back. kind of like the symbol monkey. It always returns.
Ugh, gross.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive in here. So we are still in the way the book is structured. We're in part 1, which is titled Riddles. We are currently in chapter 4 is where we're starting off. Chapter 4 is titled Topeka, and we are starting in subchapter 2. We got into subchapter 1 last time, but fell short of getting any further into that subchapter. This is going to be a little bit helter-skelter. There's some, even in this one, if we go through what we're planning on, we're going to get into part of chapter 5, so it's not all neat and tidy where it all fits one chapter per episode or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's part of the filling out process for a new book. Is like we had it down with Wastelands. Is like, okay, we're doing this much this time, and I think we had one episode the entire time through that book where it's like, we're not going to get to everything. We got to bump this to next episode. It's already happened twice with this one.
Twice in this one, yeah.
Yeah.
So, indeed.
We're still trying to figure out that sweet spot for us and everything.
Yeah.
2 things from the chat real fast before we go into the summary of what happened previously. Chris says, what, you mean I have to send another email? Okay, then, smiley face. He didn't do emoji. I appreciate that. That's just a...
No, that's old school emoji. I like that.
That's not an emoji. That's
the original.
Text. That's before emojis were a word.
That's the original emoji. That's my generation's emoji.
Our generation.
On AOL.
Thank you.
Well, you didn't get into the internet
until
until
high
high
school.
school.
I didn't. I didn't have chat until I had my first Sidekick phone.
Yeah, AOL Instant Messenger and stuff. I spent so many hours chatting on that when I was a wee child.
Not me.
So.
And then Josh says, I may have to reread Went Through the Keyhole. I've only done it once. Yeah.
You reread it.
did.
I'm probably going to be starting it here very soon.
I did not realize
because it's only
I
a
forgot
10-hour.
how short it was.
Yeah, it's only like a 10-hour book, so it's pretty short. So I've been holding off because I want it as fresh in my mind as possible.
Yeah.
So
I was worried about finishing it in time, and then I breezed right through it. I couldn't stop listening.
Yeah, I almost took the dive into it right after I finished American Prometheus. But I realized, like, I looked at the calendar and I looked at it was a 10-hour book. I'm like, dude, no, if I start it now, it'll be a distant memory in my bad memory by the time we actually get to the episode. I mean, I'll take notes, but
that's what I did. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive in. Subchapter 2. You are starting us off here, sir.
Yeah. Subchapter 1. They disembark from Blaine. And Roland almost collapses is the very end of subchapter 1.
They got on top of Blaine.
They escaped Blaine is what I said.
You said, I thought you said departed Blaine.
They did depart Blaine. You got off Blaine.
Well, now they're on top of him.
Yeah.
now. So
they're out from inside of him. So
yeah, they're outside certainly,
but so they get on top of Blaine. Sorry, Dad. They got on top of him.
I don't know. To me, depart just feels like you've completely escaped and like whatever. But like right now, I was always nervous on this part as I was reading the first time because I'm like, there's just something until they're away from him. I'm gonna be nervous just because
that last killer moment from horror movies have traumatized you too much. I've
seen enough horror movies, and Blaine has been quite the nuisance. So I didn't want to, just think like, oh yay, we've won, and they're sitting on top of him. I was just waiting for something else to happen. So I was still a little bit nervous, but go on.
So Roland's about to pass out, and Eddie yells, catch him and everything like that. So starting subchapter 2, they catch Roland and form a protective ring around him. The gunslinger is suddenly hot, filled with guilt and self-loathing. What had he... This is like his internal thoughts. What had he done to deserve such enthusiastic protectors? What, besides tearing them from their ordinary lives like a man might tear weeds out of his garden? He tries to say he is okay, but no words come out. The terrible wavery sound had transported him back to a box canyon west of Hambry all those years ago. DePape and Reynolds and old limping Jonas. Yet most of all, it was the woman from the hill he hated. And the hate he was from a black depth only a very young man can reach. And then this is a quote from the actual book here. Ah, but how could he have done aught else but hate them? His heart had been broken, and now, all these years later, it seemed to him that the most horrible fact of human existence was that broken hearts mended. My first thought was, he lied in every word, that hoary cripple with malicious eye. What words? Whose poem? He didn't know, but he knew that women could lie too. Women who hopped and grinned, and saw too much from the corners of their rheumy old eyes. It didn't matter who had written the lines of Posey. The words were true. The words were true words, and that was all that mattered. Neither Elder Jonas nor the crone on the hill had been of Martin's statue, nor even of Walter's. And when it came to evil, but they had been evil though. Then after, in the Box Canyon west of town, that sound, that and the screams of wounded men and horses. For once in his life, even the normally voluble Cuthbert had been struck silent. But all that had been long ago in another when, in the here and now, the warbling sound was either gone or had temporarily fallen below the threshold of audibility. They would hear it again, though. He knew that as well as he knew the fact that he walked a road leading to damnation. Like, this hit us like a ton of bricks right at the start of this book. Like, we had everything with Blaine and Eddie solving how to beat Blaine. Blaine is, like you said, we think dead. There might be, like, one last jump scare here and everything like that. They are standing on top of his corpse and everything.
Yes.
But my note here is just, holy crap, is this the most we've heard about Roland since book 1?
Yeah, since like the trial.
Like the trial, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a huge insight. Yeah, but we also did cover in the like postscript of the last book that King did say that he this one would be about Roland's backstory, so we had at least a little bit of a hint. And yeah, we're diving into it because we haven't really had much since book 1 when we had Roland's child rite of manhood,
the hanging of Hacks, the cook,
there was a couple flashbacks that we saw, but really outside of that we haven't seen or heard much of his backstory. So
he's mentioned things here and there, but kind of just in passing, or maybe told a little bit of a story here and everything like that. But he's never gone like full detail. I mean, we get names, we get talking about evil and the Box Canyon and
a lot of things,
friend,
a lot of stuff without context though.
Exactly.
Like there's a lot of things that seem like details, but we don't really know what any of them mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Which just feels very Kingian. You know,
he does it all the time, right?
Like, he does, yeah. So next, or my note here, got some Robert Browning poetry coming in here.
Yeah.
It seems very, very strange to me for Roland to know the Browning poem because, like, that's the inspiration for Roland. So
that's like Frodo being aware of J.R.
Yeah, like
Tolkien.
Like Frodo, like quoting the Silmarillion.
Yeah, it's like, wait. What?
Yes, like, or maybe even the Hobbit. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the Hobbit, because the Hobbit's technically a written book even inside the world. So there's really not even a good equal to what this is. Because again, this is like Robert Browning's poem inspired King to write this story, or to pull this character out. So for him to know that, it's like that's that's even more bizarre and weird than like the Beatles showing up or the Bible or some of the other weird things that we've seen. This is like very strange.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was your note, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. He says he looks up at the others and manages a smile. The trembling at the corner of his mouth had stopped, and that was something. He tells them that he's okay, but to listen closely. They are very close to where Midworld ends, and close to where Endworld begins. The first part of their quest is finished, and they have done well. They remembered their face of their fathers and stood together and had been true to one another. But they had come to a Thinny, and they must be very careful. Jake asks what a Thinny. Jake asks a Thinny and looks around nervously. Side note, Jake being nervous. The kid has every right to be, right?
Oh yeah.
After everything he's gone through, he's like, oh shit, now what? Roland explains it is a place where the fabric of existence is almost entirely worn away. It has happened more since the force of the Dark Tower began to fail. He asks if they remember what they saw below them when they left Lud. They all remembered a ground with fused to black glass, ancient pipes which gleamed with turquoise witchlight, misshapen bird freaks with wings like great leathern sails. And in my note here, I stopped and I just put, oh yeah, we remember. Like that is a haunting image, especially since Blaine zoomed in for them.
Yeah.
So they could see all the creatures in like high def detail.
Yeah, indeed. Also, for me, the whole Midworld to Endworld transition here feels very ominous.
Right.
I don't know. It's not something that makes me feel good. And I also put a quote here. It reminds me of a Churchill line. Now, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but perhaps it is the end of the beginning.
Yeah.
That's what comes to mind for me with that kind of thing. Or it even feels Lord of the Rings wise when like they hit that spot where they see the sign and it's like, I've never gone further than this. Which actually King riffs on that in The Stand.
And that's Lord of the Rings does that, right?
That's what I'm saying. Is Lord of the Rings is there, but then King riffs on it in The Stand, his version of Lord of the Rings. This is also, we know, he kind of feels like a Tolkien element to Dark Tower as well. But it just kind of feels like that, even though we don't have a physical sign saying like, Midworld ends. Welcome to Endworld. We don't necessarily have the sign like the other two versions, but it is definitely... very, I don't know, kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It feels like it's a turning of a corner a little bit here.
No, absolutely, it feels that way. And then, one other thing from the previous sections before this episode, before Roland is about to collapse, he says, "Susan, oh, Susan, my dear," something like that.
Yeah.
I just want to bring it up because in this next section here, Roland suddenly couldn't stand having them all bunched around him and got up with help from Eddie. Susannah asked who Susan was. There is a crease down her forehead that suggests she is troubled. And not just because there is a coincidental similarity of names. Roland looks at all of them and says he will tell them, but not here. Susannah says that he keeps saying that and asks if he is just putting them off again. Roland shakes his head and says they shall hear his tell this part at least, but not on top of this metal carcass. There's the Blaine carcass mentioned.
Yeah.
Jake says he feels like being up there is like playing on a dead dinosaur, and that he keeps expecting Blaine to come back to life and start messing with their heads. There's your Jake shares your fear.
Yeah.
Eddie points out that the sound is gone, and he thought it sounded like a wah-wah pedal. Jake says it reminded him of a guy in Central Park. Susannah asks if he is talking about the guy with the saw. She saw him too, but he wasn't old. And she says it isn't just geograph that's wacky here. Time is kind of funny too. Eddie puts an arm around her and squeezes her and says, "Amen to that." Susannah turns to Roland, and her look was not accusing, but there is a level and open measurement in her eyes, and Roland couldn't help but admire. She says she is holding Roland to his promise and wants to know about the girl that shares her name. Roland says she shall hear, but for now, let's get off this monster's back.
Yeah, I love the metal carcass call out. That's just, I don't know, because I guess we have very, I don't know, we've anthropomorphized Blaine quite a bit. We all see him as a he, whatever. But it just, for some reason, after, whatever is dead, there's just a part where you maybe don't interpret it the same way. So to call it a carcass is interesting, but it does also seem weird because now he's dead. It's just like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, and there's and also an aspect of Roland's character where he may not even like acknowledge Blaine past being a corrupt AI kind of thing. But for Roland to be the one that's like, yeah, this is a carcass, like this is a metal carcass, like for him to acknowledge it, it's like, oh, okay, like we got to take this seriously kind of thing, especially with the way things work in Roland's world.
Yeah.
We've seen other things that make us, there may be one last jump scare with Roland's world the way it is. So.
Yeah. Or, I mean, it could even just be like what structural damage was made by the crash. I mean, I know it wasn't.
It could be
it
purely
wasn't
logical,
It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but there was still a crash. So it's like,
It is tilted. That's the other thing.
Like
it's like they're standing on a roof that's not flat. It's got a degree of list to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's something I would be in a hurry to get off of if it were me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a fan of standing up there, that's for sure. And then my note here, Susannah and Jake seeing the same guy in Central Park isn't as surprising as if Susannah and Eddie had seen the same guy. But it is still crazy to consider, just given how big New York City is.
Yeah, I think the size gets removed a little bit, though, because since it's Central Park. Like, Central Park is certainly a big park by any means. But I feel like a lot of towns have that, too, even smaller towns, bigger towns. But there's, like, people that just know there's that guy. Right, like was the New York? Do they have like the naked cowboy or something like that in like Times Square? There's just those like legendary like people that everyone knows, and like if you're in New York, a big city like that, maybe even certain neighborhoods where everyone kind of knows that old crazy guy that sits on his step and yells at people. And I think if the dude's just doing like he's essentially like a street performer but does it in Central Park, I could see it. Whereas like, I don't know, if they were all from like different points of the thing and this guy happened to just be on some random corner, I'd be a little bit more like, wow, what are the fucking odds? But
well, they probably all had been to Central Park at one point or another. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying that time-wise, it's not as surprising as if Susanna and Eddie knew.
certainly, yeah.
That's what I'm saying is that.
Yeah.
But still, Susanna and Jake, it's like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
The other thing is, as I pointed out in my note, remember they're both closer in time. Eddie is the big outlier, but also they're both upper class, so they're far more likely to probably be in the same parts of Central Park.
Yeah.
You know, they probably live close to Central Park.
Yeah, Susanna being upper class.
and so is
Jake
Jake
as well.
So that not only are they closer in time, but even like socioeconomically, they're a little bit closer. Whereas Eddie's kind of in the projects. So Central Park is probably not as common for him as it would have been for Jake growing up.
Or the different areas of Central Park, because
Yeah.
if Eddie's coming from the slums, kind of thing, like Dutch Hill kind of area.
Yeah, he's probably got smaller parks closer to him that he goes to. That
Well, they played at a park. They played basketball together.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't go to Central Park for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of find that interesting because I think we tend to like remember the time gap a little bit better with those two, but like also they're kind of from the same side of the tracks, quote unquote. Which is kind of interesting too because I think we tend to like not think about that because Jake like is just a kid, so he's maybe not as like into like whatever. It's like he has a in-house like maid that takes care of
they
him,
have a housekeeper,
a housekeeper and stuff. So it's like, he's not, and his dad works for like a high up in the network. So they're not hard up for money. So
Exactly.
kind of an interesting thing too.
Yeah.
Connection wise.
And I can't remember what book or show it was, but there's a character, and it is a woman, and she's described like Susanna here with the crease in her forehead, and the author calls it her "I want" line.
That's Franny, sir.
That is Franny. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is it.
Very fresh because that happens at the very, very, very tail end of the stand.
Yeah, because when Stu gets back,
he sees it when they first meet, and he like thinks about like that's a very distinct I want line. And at the very end of the thing when they're talking about going back or leaving Colorado, he mentions seeing the I want line again or something like that. So it's like it's definitely Franny that you're thinking of there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what it was. It's funny. This is one of the sections that we're supposed to cover last time, so this is a little bit older than some of the stuff we're going to cover later. But yeah, that is absolutely true. It's like I can't believe that I didn't piece that together. That's the stand.
Yeah.
So Stephen King cross-pollinating little things there. And that's the end of subchapter 2.
Indeed. So let's jump on over to subchapter 3. So getting off Blaine was easier said than done. Blaine had crashed on an outdoor version of the Cradle of Blood, and it was easily 25 feet from the roof of the train to the cement below. So, again,
busted leg if you jump that.
Yeah, again, that's where I'm like, that makes me even more nervous when I get to that. I'm like, see, so now not only like are we on top of what is Blaine's carcass that who knows, but you're also a little bit tilted, but you're also 25 feet above cement. Like, let's please get away from this as quick as possible.
No, let's sit down and have some palaver.
Let's not see any compound fractures in this story. Is my thought. If there were a ladder like the one that came from the hatch that had been destroyed in the it had been destroyed in the crash, because we remember when that hatch opened up, there was a small ladder that came down. Roland rummaged through his pack and took out Susanna's harness and reflected that they had left her wheelchair back in Ludd, rushing to get onto Blaine. Susanna asked what Roland wanted that for, with a distaste in her voice. And then I have a direct quote here. I hate them honky muffas down in Mississippi worse than I hate that harness, she said. Or she had once told Eddie in the voice of Detta Walker, but sometimes it's a close thing. It's close thing, sugar. I missed one other word there. So Roland told her soft while smiling and unbraided it, setting the seat portion aside and braided the pieces of the harness and a rope he had together and made a rope with a loop at the bottom. Jake stepped into it with total confidence and grabbed Oi, who was nervous. Jake asked if he was afraid, and Oi answered afraid, but quieted down. The rope took Jake down all but the last 4 feet, which he dropped with no problem. I do love Susanna's absolute hatred for the harness. It just it would make sense. Anyone that's ever worn a harness of any kind, whether it's rock climbing, skydiving, any kind of harness, they are not comfortable. Like they're meant to be secure and safe, not comfortable. So I can totally see real world wise why she would absolutely hate the harness.
Yeah.
So, let's see. So my first note, I love her. I love it goes back to early book 3 as well, because that's about the first time that the harness came up, and then she's hated it since then. Like, this isn't a new thing. So it's kind of it feels like a throwback a little bit, especially if you've waited 7 years between the books, which we didn't, but you might. This makes me laugh for sure.
Yep. Brocky joins us and says hi, and he says, "LOL, half hour in and we're still getting off Blaine," and then a smiley face. Yes, we are Roland type. We are slow plotters here at the word slingers, and whatnot.
Indeed.
My note here says, "I've never been on top of a train."
Brocky also says he did the 7-year wait.
The 7-year wait
between these books.
Oof.
I can't imagine, man. Now the thing is, I will say, I'm not gonna minimize the suffering, but with the new modern George R. R. Martin bullshit, it really puts it in perspective, right?
How long has that wait gone so far?
They published one. It was around the first or so season, so it's been 11, 12 years since the last book was published. So we no longer get credit for being the most tortured fan base. No, and I mean, there's other ones out there. There's been some series where authors have passed away and stuff, which we almost get in this series.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, I'm not even using that to minimize, because I'm just saying there are people that have it worse than us. That's brutal.
My note here is, I've never been on top of a train. I've been in trains, and I've been in. We have a train system here in Utah called Front Runner.
Tracks.
No, Front Runner is a train, not a rail system. The Front Runner is the one that runs from Ogden down to Provo. It is an actual train.
Yeah.
So, Tracks is a light rail system. Front Runner has 2 decks on it.
Yeah.
And I've been up to the second deck and rode on it because my kid thought it was cool. 25 feet still feels awfully high. Like, even if I imagine,
I think the train is the track is elevated above.
It is.
So, yeah.
But also just like thinking okay, I'm second story, but even if I'm on top of this roof, I'd put myself at 18 to 20 feet. So Blaine's a tall motherfucker.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that he's tilted is also just something just like. But I love that Jake just has no hesitation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting for him to not be afraid. It seems like he's one that should be afraid.
That's actually what your note says here.
A lot of people, or a lot of things have happened to Jake in this series.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, Roland and Jake in a lengthy drop went a certain way.
Yeah, this is true.
So I guess Jake has gained some trust here.
He has.
So going on here, this area was nowhere near as grand as the Cradle of Blood. It looked more like an old-fashioned. It looked more old-fashioned. White boards, overhanging eaves, high narrow windows, slate shingles. It was a Western look. The sign above the door said Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. Towns Roland figured, and the last one sounded familiar to him. He wondered if there had been a town of Santa Fe in the barony of Magus. But that had led back to Susan, and the line enters his head: "If you love me, Roland, love me." Bird and bear and hare and fish. And he realized Eddie was talking, and it took all of his willpower to pull him back from Susan and tell Eddie his mind is wandering. Eddie repeats, "Susannah next." Roland said no. Eddie, then her, and then he would go last. Eddie asks if he'll be okay with his hand, and Roland assured him he will be fine. I always just picture a smile there too. I don't think King really writes it that way,
fine.
but I feel like there's a little bit of like a Han Solo-ish smirk where it's like, I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, let's all say that we can agree for one thing, Eddie, to tell Eddie, don't underestimate Roland.
Yeah, exactly. Baraki says, I mean, it wasn't so awful. You find other things to read. And then it's glorious to finally get the new book.
Yeah, what's funny too is I think it would have been worse if podcasts existed.
Oh yeah,
because
the stipulation, the not stipulation,
the
anticipation, but the wild theories, the discussion and the outlandish. Because I think that's some of the problem that we have with modern era is that we get so hyped up and that we get so set. Oh, I want this, and I want this character to do this, and I want this character to do this, and then when you get it, you don't get that.
Yeah.
And your characters do something completely different. And then you walk out of the film going, my version would have been better. And it's just you have to kind of move past that. That's why sometimes I love a movie, and then when I go back and look at it, I go, no, that wouldn't have been as good. Or flip flop it. I come out of a movie and I go, man, that kind of sucked. And then I rewatched it again. I go, man, that was actually really good. Why did I hate it the first time? Oh, it's because I had anticipation of something happening, kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I like to think that we would support each other, but I think there would also be a nature of, like Rocky saying, you just move on, read other things, and then it's exciting when it happens. But it's like, I feel like that you'd almost undercut that by having the more communal thing, because we'd all just be sitting there going, where the fuck is the next book? And
then the news would break, the king got hit by a van, and dude, we would have like emergency podcast after emergency podcast with his condition.
Oh man, yeah. So moving on, it says Eddie jumped on, and Roland reflects when Eddie first came to this world, he could have lowered him easily, even with the missing fingers. But Eddie had been without his drugs for months now and had put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Susannah helped lower him down. So I think that's the other thing too, is it made me laugh, because it's like I didn't know about the weight necessary, but there is the other part of it where it's like, if Jake has to drop down 4 feet, Eddie, you have to go first. How is Susannah going to get down?
Yeah.
If she went first, how is she going to get down?
Yeah.
You going to try to get Jake to catch
kid.
her? But then
always got her.
But then on top of that, then you get to this later part. It's like, God damn, Eddie, are you so close? Do you not realize you put on the weight of muscle to where, because if Roland needs Susannah's help, it's funny to me, because he's like, Susannah next.
It's just the ladies first mentality.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, probably with Eddie for sure, because he's kind of in that he's more of the emotional type, whereas Roland would be the
logic, cold logic.
Yeah, exactly. Very strategic, where he's just like, all right, we got to do it this way.
Yeah.
Roland tells her it is her turn and smiles at her and reflects that it felt more natural to smile these days. She agreed, but it did not move. He asked her what was wrong. She said nothing, but her hand went to her stomach. Roland said that he didn't believe her and asked why she was rubbing her belly and asked if she was hurt. She said no, she is fine, and he asked if she actually is. I also missed it, but it also mentioned that her hand went away like it was hot, like a hot stove almost. Once he called it out,
she realized what she was doing, and she's like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
Then why are you holding your stomach? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And you see that a lot with kids. It's like kids handing the cookie jar or something.
What are you doing? Nothing.
Yeah.
What's in your hand? No. Puts it behind it. Nothing.
Yeah. She says that they can palaver, but now is not the time nor the place. He asked if the palaver would just be the adults, and she said no, just the two of them. Then she gets on to be lowered down. Roland frowned and hoped that his first thought was wrong, as he saw her hold her stomach, because she had been in the speaking ring with the demon, and the demon had its way with her while Jake was crossing over. And then, as direct quote from the book here, often, demonic contact changed things.
Yeah.
So that's a comforting thought, Roland.
No, it's not.
My notes here. Some signs, literally, that this is our world. We covered it in the last subchapter, where we saw a United States interstate sign, as well as we saw a Kansas State something or other sign.
State road. Yeah.
Yeah, we had some slides for it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it is looking old timey, which would not really fit our world. As we know, the interstate era of our world, you're not going to find stuff that looks old time.
I will say that train stations are famous for holding on to the past.
Go
look at the Union Pacific Station downtown Salt Lake City here. It looks very much like it did in the 1800s. So I will say that.
Yeah.
On while pointing out that there is some concern, because Roland recognized one of the town names, he thinks.
Yeah, Santa Fe.
No, the other one.
Santa Fe is the third one. And he says, did he recognize the third one? And it was a core question.
Towns Roland figured, and the last one sounded familiar to him. Oh no, it is Santa Fe.
Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I misread that. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's familiar to us.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So we're getting a lot from Roland here that we don't really understand, but we are seeing him vulnerable. That's at least a truth. But we don't really know kind of what a lot of these details are that we're seeing.
Why? That's the big thing. My note here is a lot of emotional stuff, but the big question is why? You know, what is this about Roland that's triggering what's going on here, and everything like that. And we obviously know this is from his past, and everything. We know that there's a woman involved, and man, your mind's just running races trying to figure that out. The thing like we just talked about. First thoughts, oh, is this like his first love? Is this like his beloved? Is oh my God, is Susan his wife?
Yeah.
Did he have a wife? You have all these thoughts going through your head right here.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Susannah grabs her belly, and we get the
Yeah.
line about demonic possession changing things, like the demon circle, and it's just like, what? Wait, what? And of course, this all happens away from Eddie.
Yeah.
All of this happens away from Eddie.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man.
And then my last note, this is a good reminder that we do have an issue with Susannah here. Again, this is the longest break between books, but also so much shit has been going on that I don't think much of us have had a real time to stop and think since River Crossing?
Yeah.
Like this has been breakneck since pretty much leaving. I mean, you left River Crossing, and then from there the God Drum started, and then you get to the bridge, and
You get the plane.
It's been a fucking roller coaster ride since then. So it's like I don't think we've ever had a chance to like stop, breathe, take an inventory of what's going on.
What the fuck is happening?
Yeah, and it's like now we're maybe finally getting it. And so again, though, it is good writing from King though, because he's kind of reminding a new reader, whether it's probably not a new reader, but maybe someone that hasn't read the last book in 7 years. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. So next up, it says Roland then lowered himself down. Eddie mentioned it was too bad they had to lose the harness, and Susannah chimed in saying she wasn't sorry, and she'd rather crawl on the pavement until she got chewing gum up to her elbows than get in the harness again. Roland said that they haven't lost anything and pulled it. So it mentions as he's going down, he like avoids going to the left, and then when he's down there, he like whips it to the left, and then it comes loose. It's like, does that happen in Lord of the Rings? Is there a point when they're worried about losing a rope and then it comes down like the elvish rope or something? So
Frodo and Sam.
Yeah, not that they knew the trick, but somehow it comes loose on it.
I think it's Gollum throws it down.
Is it?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dude, it's been so long since I've watched them.
It's been a long time.
Even longer since I read them.
Yeah, exactly. So it comes loose, comes down. Jake and Oy remarked at the neat trick, and Eddie presumed court, and Roland confirmed, and Eddie said, better you than me with the drill instructor from hell. I can only imagine what Eddie would have been with what we've seen of Court.
Oh, he'd be dead. Court would have killed him. That, or he would have been the what's it called, where you cut the tongue off of someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been Court's first day with Eddie. He's like, all right, maggot, that's it. Stick your tongue up.
Yeah.
There we go.
So my notes here, of course, Roland is able to lower himself down securely without abandoning the rope. That just seems fitting. And then my last note, once again, Susannah's loathing for the harness, even though presumably she will need it more now that they are without a chair.
Yeah.
So that is the end of the subchapter. So jump on over subchapter 4.
Let's get right into it. As they walk towards the doors leading into the station, the warbling sound starts again. Roland gets amused seeing the three of them wrinkle their noses and the corners of their mouths all pulled down at the same time. That would be pretty comical to see three people make the exact same face like that at the exact same time. It makes them look like a blood family as well as Quartet. Susannah points towards the park, and the signs looming over the trees are wavering slightly, like things in a heat haze. Jake asks if that is from the Thinny. Roland nods. Jake asks if they can get around it. Roland says Thinnies are dangerous, but they are like swamps filled with quicksand and salags. Is that how you would pronounce that? Salags? S-A-L-I-G-S?
Something like that, yeah.
Are dangerous. He asks if he knows what those are. Jake says they know what quicksand is, and if salags are long green things with big teeth, they know those too. Roland says that is what they are. So we got alligators in Roland's world.
Yeah, and
or crocodiles. I mean, they're kind of interchangeable, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, indeed.
So my note here is I said you got to give it to Jake. He is pretty quick to pick up what Roland describes just from the context. No description, just a swamp creature.
But let's be fair though. You say swamp creature,
alligator,
you're going to imagine immediately one of those.
That's my first thought.
Yes.
But I'm saying pretty good for a kid to pick that up, you know?
Yeah.
I guess it makes more sense that a kid knows his animals, you know? Kind of thing. So
I wonder if this world has anything that's happy or cuddly, surprising wise, or is everything just vicious and dangerous? Sure seems like it keeps going. Like you've got lobstrosities. You've got there was a wild cat that we heard in book 2 that we've never actually. I Wastelands for the first quarter of that book. I was bracing for that cat too.
Yeah,
because I was just like, that's foreshadowing, man. We're gonna end up, and I was like, this world, it's gonna be some like it's going to be like a lion or like a mountain lion, but it's going to be like 3 times the size.
A saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah, it's going to be fucking massive and like vicious or whatever. So
we do have something cute and cuddly.
Oi.
How dare you?
Vicious.
No.
You set yourself up for that one.
He is cute and cuddly. You stop it.
Viciously attacking children on bridges.
Stop it. Stop it.
In fact, I think Jake probably still has the marks on his hands.
No. Blaine healed those. It never happened. But they do have deer. They hunt deer in the forest in book 3 at the beginning. So we do have deer at least, and not the homicidal deer like in that one video. Growls with like teeth.
Yeah.
So moving on, Susannah looks back at Blaine one more time and says, "No silly questions and no silly games." And she says the book was right about that. She then asks Roland if they might meet Beryl Evans, the woman who wrote Charlie the Choo-Choo. Roland says it is possible, but he doesn't think it will happen. He says his world is like a huge ship sunk near enough to shore that lots of stuff washed up on the beach, and some of it is really fascinating and maybe even useful if Kyle allows it, but it is still wreckage, senseless wreckage. Like this place, he thinks, looking around. Eddie says this place is a little worn, but he couldn't call it wreckage. He runs his fingers down one glass pane. They left 4 clear tracks. He says dusty and plenty of it, but no cracks. Says the building had been left unattended at most since the start of summer. Roland shrugs and nods. He was only half listening and paying attention with half of his mind. The other half was fixed on 2 things: the warbling of the Thinny and keeping the memories that wanted to swamp him away. That's quite a thing for Roland to say. He already fell over once from the memories, and now he's trying to keep them from swamping him again.
Yeah.
Like, so it doesn't seem like he was able to actually push them away ever. It's like they're constantly pushing on him, and he's, holding them back.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting way for Roland to put that. And then I put my note here, I love Roland's way of describing his world as a shipwreck, is that there are things cast there, but not all of it's useful.
Yeah.
So that's just an interesting thing from Roland to see there.
Yeah. And Broxy said Court with Eddie would have been an entertaining read, but though I know it was a joke, I don't think Court would have killed him. Eddie is too smart and would have adapted. He would have got his lumps, though.
Yeah.
Court would have tenderized Eddie over the course of however long of a time. Probably gagged him, too. I think that's probably what he would have done.
Sewn his lips shut until the end of training. He's like, you don't get your right to speak back until the end of training, maggot.
Then Brocky also says pit bulls are cute and cuddly, too, till they ain't. And then Dirty Mike says Oi is the best villain in the story.
You stop it.
Shame.
On all of you. Slandering Oi. How dare you?
I need to go figure out a way to get that AI image we've got, feed it into another AI, and give us like a vicious version with the teeth out and baring its teeth. So I think one thing about King, and we get a taste of it here, is he will dabble in some, that's cool stuff, like world building wise, but never really allows it to completely take over and totally sidetrack the story. So many other fantasy things are just so self-indulgent. I don't need a novella length stretch of a book telling me the backstory of some noun. I get some people probably dig that, but for me, world building only goes so far. King tends to generally hedge towards not enough world building more than too much. Like if there's 2 extremes, he tends to hedge towards the not enough, and I love that because it's like titillating.
You
like
leave it up to your imagination to think about the stuff and fill it in and everything like that. We actually had a conversation about this yesterday on the Patreon Hangout, where we were talking about a certain aspect of one thing and just being like, what do you think? I don't want to say it because it is in the future of the books. Yeah. But we're like, what do you think it is? And Tad had his opinion and I had my opinion, and we talked with everyone that was in the chat and everything like that, but it's never explained.
Yeah.
It never gets into it. It never talks about it. And so it's just
and how many times have we seen that, even in these book clubs, where it's been like,
all the time.
That's such a cool world building thing, and it like opens up all these possibilities for this world, but it's always just like a line or two. It's never like, and I get it. I get a lot of people love that really in-depth stuff.
It's not a problem to like that. It's not.
No, it's just not my thing. Those things tend to like get me.
It bogs you down is what it is. Because I've talked to you about it before. Both of us struggled when we were reading Lord of the Rings in certain parts, House of Healing for me, is that it got too far into the weeds and I lost interest.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
You got to keep me on the story that's going on and build the world while giving me a story. Yeah. Not just literally the quote that I said yesterday on the Patreon Hangout is like, and then the sword belonged to so-and-so, and the sword belonged to so-and-so, and then his father lost it in the woods until it was found by so-and-so. And you pointed out, it's like, Yeah, but the problem is, unless you tie directly to one of those so-and-sos into the story,
Yeah.
what the fuck do we care?
Yeah, why are you giving me 10 generations who own the store unless like the fifth one like means something?
Did something
Like, or-
with it that actually mattered.
or has
you
some
know,
relevance to the story. Like,
but there are people that like that, and that's fine.
yeah, for
It's
sure,
just that,
for sure.
especially in King's world, he's basically explaining it here through Roland. That's not what he's going to do.
Yeah.
There's the one that blew my mind the first time.
Baraki says Tom Bombadil.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's another one. And again, I am not, because I think I'm in the minority on this feeling. I think
Yeah.
more people that are into this fantasy stuff actually appreciate that way
Oh,
more
yeah.
in depth. And I'm totally okay with that. It's a personal taste thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I love King's like minimalism when it comes to that stuff because
there was a series that I read that involved dragons, and I don't remember much about it because it got way into the minutia like that,
Yeah.
explaining like the history of how things had come up.
yeah.
And I got into the third book, and finally I was just like, I can't keep track of all this. Like,
Yeah.
I can't, and so I gave up on the series. I don't even remember what it was called.
Yeah.
But it's partial. It's because I'm too dumb, it's kind of thing. Is how I feel.
Yeah, I
so.
think it comes down to a taste thing in a lot of ways. But yeah,
I
for me, I love it, and I think that
Yeah.
King's done that all the way through. But this is a perfect time that this really struck me because again, they ask about Beryl Evans. Roland's like, I don't know if it even matters.
Yeah.
And like the shipwreck stuff, it feels like the perfect time because it feels like that's King kind of being king, and like every once in a while he'll throw little nuggets at us.
Yeah.
But there's never a time that he's like, okay, here you go, you're sitting down to a 7-course meal. Let me just
Shove it down your throat.
Yeah, that's not King's way necessarily, and I do appreciate that.
Absolutely. Going on, Susannah says that Ludd had been going whack for centuries. This place may or may not be Topeka, but it looks like a creepy town from the Twilight Zone. She says they probably don't remember that one, and both Eddie and Jake say, yes, I do, in perfect unison. I can hear that
Yeah.
on film in a Flanagan show.
And we all know it too.
Oh, yeah.
And even if they hadn't done that reboot of 4 or 5 years ago, we'd all still know it. Like that's such
It's
a
famous.
Yeah, it's such an iconic thing. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. So Eddie and Jake look at each other and they both start laughing. They high-five each other. Jake says they still show reruns, and Eddie says how they play it with bankruptcy lawyers who look like short-haired terriers. He says Susannah is right about this place not being like Ludd, but then he asks why would it be? He doesn't know when, but he knows they crossed over to a different world. He points to the blue Interstate 70 shield as if that proves his case beyond a shadow of a doubt. Susannah asks if it is Topeka, where are all the people? Eddie shrugs and raises his hands. And then you have the first note here.
I'll also point out, not seeing a lot of people, that sounds like Topeka.
Have you ever been to Kansas?
And that's has nothing against. It's just not exactly, but I've been in some of those surrounding states, and like
I've been to Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been in Nebraska, and one of the things I remember about Nebraska. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
Dad.
and I do want to make sure
Yeah,
I'm
go
clear.
ahead.
I'm not being like derisive. I'm just saying like Utah when I was younger.
Oh, yeah.
This we used to be that way, and a lot
yeah.
of the state still is. So I'm not saying derisively. I just have to make a joke because it's like
Oh, yeah.
it's not like you're like in like fucking Dallas, Texas
Yeah.
right now. You're in,
I will say where we do live in the valley with the capital of the state, Salt Lake City, Utah here. And it's close to 1 million people. It's over 1 million people, something like that.
I think it's a little over 1 million in the whole valley.
In the valley here. So we get that population feeling. But when I go to places like I went to San Francisco last fall, it's obviously bigger and it's obviously, oh my God, there's more people. But I will tell you, I've been to Nebraska when I was a kid. And we went to a restaurant on a Saturday night, and there were 6 people in the restaurant. 4 of them worked for the restaurant before we walked in. There were 2 customers, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is not how it is. And then I realized, oh, no, this is small town America. Because we were in a small town. We didn't stay in a big city like Lincoln or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Or Hemingford Home. We stayed in a small town. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But,
Yeah.
still, there should be someone,
I know.
right?
I'm just making a joke. So I like the Twilight Zone thing because for Susannah, it was a show that ended within months of when she was drawn. So it was kind of coming down to its final stages when she was drawn. So it would have been very high on her in her mind. But so often in pop culture, we're very surprised by the ones that actually have staying power. Sometimes you kind of know like this one's going to last, but a lot of times, 20 years later, you're like for instance, like. I'm not even going to say it's like a small thing, but like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The fact that that has just continually evolved in every generation of kids since our generation
My daughter's a fan.
has found new versions of it and stuff. It's like kind of shocks me. Also, Power Rangers, another one. When I found out my niece was in like a certain age, she loved Power Rangers. I'm like, how is that still like? So I've been in that same spot, and I also said in my note here, as also it was a horror / sci-fi show, neither of which were actually taken seriously in her day in the 1950s and 60s. They wouldn't have been. So kind of in the prime of when she was like doing her thing, those are like throwaway things, horror and sci-fi. So she probably could not imagine that people would still be watching that show decades later. Also, I doubt that she had any concept of reruns in her day, because that was still so early in the run of TV that
They didn't have that.
Reruns weren't as ubiquitous as they are in our childhood or Jake and Eddie's day. So I love
still today there's still reruns.
Yeah.
It's on cable television, stuff like that. I know me and you, neither one of us subscribe to cable and everything like that, but they're still there.
Yeah, for sure. So I do love that because they even made a joke of that in Back to the Future, because they're watching one and like Marty McFly is like, oh yeah, I remember this one.
It's
Like,
a classic. It's like classic. It's new.
that line always bothers me though, because like, does the kid really know it's a new episode? Like, I feel like a kid at a certain age is just like, you're just watching TV. I don't know.
I don't know.
That always bothers
me. You got to
me,
realize that in that generation is the generation that was built around. All right, it's time for this show. We're going to sit down as a family and
but they're
watch
they're just eating dinner and it's on the side. So that's why I was just like, it just doesn't feel like they don't. Whatever. Total side tangent. But Twilight Zone's obviously like an iconic like show of all time. So I do love King throwing it in there, and it's King. He grew up on or not grew up on, but he certainly watched the Twilight Zone.
Oh, he
in
did.
His day,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. My note here is I just remember being really confused. So far, we only travel between worlds with doors.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way. I mean, literally, even in the demon circle.
Or death.
That's true.
Yeah, death and doors.
But they said death is just through a doorway kind of thing. Like, I think it's Martin that says that. But so far, our quartet has only ever had the ability to travel through doors. Even the demon circle, Eddie drew a door to bring Jake through and everything like that. Normal-looking doors, weird that they stand all by themselves, but they're still just doors.
Yeah.
So for a train crash, is that what did it? Like, there's some...
Yeah,
there's some...
This is strange.
This is strange. Yeah.
This is very strange.
And so going on, Jake peers in the glass of the center door, cupping his hands around his face. He looks for several seconds and then pulls back fast. He says, no wonder the town is so quiet. Roland steps up behind him and looks in. He comes to two conclusions before even looking at what Jake had seen that made him pull back. One is that this is assuredly a train station, but not a cradle, not a station for Blaine. Second is that it did indeed belong to Jake, Eddie, and Susannah's world, but perhaps not to their Wen. He thinks to himself that it is the Thinny, and we must be very careful. It's so bizarre for Roland to be able to just draw that just from looking inside of this little booth.
Yeah.
Like, he looks inside this window, and he draws those conclusions just instantly like that.
Yeah. And my note, this is trippy. So, like, did the world, before it moved on, did people in Lud take rides to Topeka? Like
what?
I know that was on the map.
Yeah.
But, like, maybe it was so intense as we were going through the riddles and stuff. I don't know that we really stopped to, like, think about, like, the implications of the fact that this train theoretically says it's going from Lud to Topeka, which we know Topeka, and now we're actually seeing that, like,
it's our Topeka.
It looks like this isn't just like Roland's world where there's a town that happens to also be called Topeka.
See, that's what I thought it was.
It's like, no, this is ours. So it's like, and there's no way to know this, but it makes me wonder, like, back in the day when this was like high class people riding this barony coach, were they like crossing into a different world? Like, that's
see,
it boggles the mind for me.
I always just took it as that there was a town in Roland's world called Topeka.
Yeah.
That's what it seemed the most logical for me, is like, oh, there's Topeka. We have a Topeka. Hey, look at that. Similarities between the worlds. Just like we saw.
That'd be a new similarity too, though.
No, we have the Beatles in his world.
No, but towns-wise, we haven't ever seen, like, oh, here's, Boise in Roland's world or anything. Mm-hmm. That would be a new connection that we hadn't seen up to that. If that had been
nothing
the case.
had been named the same and everything like that. So
yeah, we definitely have some crossover stuff, but never was like a town necessarily.
I mean, there's towns. There's old west towns called River Crossing. So
That's that. Find me a town now called River Crossing is what I mean. And like Gilead obviously comes from the Raven. Edgar Allan Poe mentions Gilead, but again, that's not a real thing like type stuff. So, what do you got next?
So going on here, inside the window that Jake looked in, two corpses were leaning together on a long bench. If not for their hanging, wrinkled faces and black hands, they might have been revelers who had fallen asleep in the station after an arduous part and missed their train home. On the wall behind them was a board marked departures, with cities and towns and baronies marching down it in a line. Some were Denver, Wichita, and Omaha. Roland had known a one-eyed gambler named Omaha who had died with a knife in his throat at a watch-me table. He had stepped into the clearing at the end of the path with his head thrown back, and his last breath had sprayed blood all the way up to the ceiling. I said, my note here, that's quite an image, but yet still fitting with Roland, like what we know of him and everything. Still, such a Wild West death, right? Like.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Watch me. We don't know what.
Doc Holliday. His first scene in Tombstone.
Yeah.
With playing the cards with the guy that talks shit on him, says you're nothing without those guns, so he ends up killing him with a knife.
Yeah.
Like that's like a quintessential Old West scene, I think. So yeah, totally agree with you there. So mine, a wise saying I once heard, I don't know who I could attribute it to, is never play cards with a guy whose first name is a city. You will not like the results. It's never good because it's never like the dude's actual name is that. It's always that's his nickname.
Yeah.
And if a dude's nickname is a city, you don't want to gamble with that guy. It won't go your way.
So my next note here is I said, now we have dead people, not like new dead, like Eddie was saying. They don't get to that stage without being there for a while. And then moving on the ceiling there was a beautiful 4-sided clock that had stopped at 4:14, and Roland figured it would never move again. It was a sad thought, but this was a sad world. Roland couldn't see any more dead people, but his experience suggested that if there were 2, there would be 4 more somewhere out of sight, or 4 dozen. And I just had to stop him to say, that's just a happy thought from Roland. You know, like, oh, there's 2 dead people. Well, there's going to be more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
my note. Yeah. Not the happiest thought, but one that certainly would probably had a lot of experience with in his world.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. For sure.
His world seems like that kind of world that there's probably a number of times you're like, oh, there's one dead body. Then you like grid out and search and it's like, oh shit, there's like 15 more.
So moving on here, Eddie asks if they should go in. Roland asks why. They have no business in there as it doesn't lie on the path of the beam. Eddie starts to give him shit about being a great tour guide. Jake interrupts with a request Roland didn't understand. Do either of you guys have a quarter? He was looking at Eddie and Susannah. He was standing next to a square metal box. Written on it was the Topeka Capital Journal, covers Kansas like no other. Your hometown paper. Read it every day. Eddie shook his head amused. Lost all my change at some point, probably climbing a tree just before you joined us in an all-out effort to avoid becoming snack food for a robot bear. Sorry.
I mean, didn't he lose all of his clothes, or did he get more clothes before he came back after all the shootout at the Leaning Tower?
I mean, his clothes were in the Leaning Tower.
But he also came through with airport security. Would they have probably stripped him of most of his, if he had pocket change?
No, he got released by them. They had to let him go because he didn't have the drugs.
Yeah, I don't know.
So if you're released by them, I mean, he bought hot dogs and soda, so he had money. Because it's not like in 1986 he was using a debit card.
Yeah,
87.
There's no such thing.
Yeah, there is no debit card, so he would have had to use cash to buy Roland the hot dogs.
That's true.
Soda pop and the Anison, right?
Baraki mentions about my comment about multiple bodies in Roland's world. He says, like the scene he made in Tall.
Yeah, exactly. You would see the first ones in the main street, but you know that there would, if you followed the trail, there would be more. See, exactly like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
My only note here is just classic Eddie being a smartass about coming very close to dying.
Yeah.
Like, that's his way of coping, is the sarcasm.
Yeah.
So.
And then my note, again, Roland playing the king side here. It's not really part of our journey. Why waste time on it?
Yep.
Also in this world, wandering into places is probably how you end up being prematurely perished.
Yeah.
Seems to me, right? Like, so far, have we seen Roland or anyone in his party wander into places that it doesn't, like, I think of, like, the way station. Like, going down into that cellar. Like, that didn't go well. Like, that.
No.
I just feel like any time you're probably better to stay under the sun and on your path.
Just keep
Don't-
going.
Yeah, like, and I know it seems like we're not in his world anymore, but still, Roland's gonna have that shit ingrained in his mind where it's like, if you can help. I mean, dude, going into the fucking bar in Toll almost cost him. The one dude almost fucking knifed him
Why did he stay in Toll? Why did he stay one night?
because of Allie.
I know, but what? But why stay?
And didn't he admit that it was a mistake too?
Yeah.
He's like, I know this is a mistake, but
I should be moving on, but he stayed another night after that.
yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's Roland's probably general SOP is probably to don't go investigating strange noises or weird buildings that might have
he's
things
barely
in there.
survived before. That also might be bad for your health. He probably
Yeah.
knows that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So moving on here, Susannah had her purse open and was rummaging. She said, "Wait a minute." The image made Roland grin broadly in spite of all of his preoccupations. It was so damn womanly somehow. She was so absorbed with the Kleenex, shaking them to make sure nothing stuck inside, a compact mirror, a comb that she didn't see, a comb, and then she's so busy she didn't see Roland walk past her, drawing his gun from her docker's clutch as he went, and he fired a single time. Susannah let out a little scream, dropping her purse and slapping at the empty holster. She yells, "Honky, you scared the living Jesus out of me." Roland tells her to take better care of her gun, or the next time someone takes it, the hole would be between her eyes. He then asks Jake if it is a news-telling device or does it hold paper. Jake says both. Oy had drawn away and was looking at Roland mistrustfully. Jake poked his finger into the bullet hole. Roland tells him to open it. And then so my note right here is, that has to be one of the best examples of who Roland is as a person. Despite being preoccupied with his past and everything going on in his mind, we just talked about him trying to push memories away. It's taking physical, like emotional, mental, physical ability to keep that at bay, that he's only half listening and half thinking towards the problems at hand.
Yeah.
And the way Susannah was rummaging in her purse, he still recognizes it for a perfect teaching opportunity.
Yeah.
Despite all of his preoccupations and everything going on, he still is like, let's teach her a lesson. Pay better attention to your gun, lady.
And it would certainly seem that Roland is would be a cutter of the Gordian knot here.
Oh, yeah.
He's
Simple solution. Why are we looking for a quarter? Just force our way in.
also, this will always remind me of John asking the T-800 if he had a quarter before he breaks the payphone, unloading all the quarters in Terminator 2.
Bam.
That's just that. This feels like an echo of that scene to me. So I'll always remember that. Also good to remember, paper is like gold to Roland. It's been a while since we've talked about that, so it's easy for us to forget that. So for Roland, again, I think he's maybe moving beyond amazement, but I'm sure in the back of his mind somewhere there's an element of like, what the fuck are these people wasting paper on?
Yeah, it may also be a little bit of anticipation for him here. It's just like, is this just something that tells the news, or does it have paper?
Yeah.
Like, fascinated that they're still, how much they use paper, that kind of thing.
Just imagine Roland watching someone back in like Eddie's day for a day, like buy a newspaper, read it, throw it away. Maybe wrap.
Not even read the whole thing.
Yeah, not even read the whole thing. Maybe even like wrap some like a fish or something in it. Like there's any number of things. Like we're so wasteful with like our paper.
Back
and
in the
stuff
day,
that-
like butcher shops used to wrap meat and stuff like that in
Yeah.
newspaper. And
Yeah,
you just,
exactly.
Imagine when he finds out about butcher's paper or wax paper or something like that you cook with, and it's like, use it once and throw it away, kind of thing.
Yeah, Baraki says, I love every one of these lessons that Roland gives the quartet. I can hear Court teaching Roland and his friends these lessons too, but with more physical abuse.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? There's probably at least one time, whether it was Roland himself or one of his friends, that had this exact lesson.
Yeah, they
That
weren't
was-
paying attention. They had a gun on their hip, and Court walks past, draws it, and shoots it between their boots.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah,
that. Just like,
for sure. Or
and
pistol
then-
whips them with it.
no, shoots it. When they turn and they start to draw their other gun, he pistol whips them across the face.
Seems about right.
Right?
Seems the speed for.
But also at the same time, do any of them get guns before they beat Court?
Yeah, I think they get trained. They just don't like those would be like training guns. Like they're not ones.
Oh, they learn to shoot before.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, but they're not going to have guns they're carrying with them out of like,
No.
the class, not classroom, but like the setting where they're
Yeah.
learning. Like they're not being able to take them home to like practice. They're not
Right.
carrying guns as they're walking through the town. Not
Right.
until later. I think that's the demarcation where like they're not going to get them until they've.
But they'll be like at a range practicing shooting, and you'll see two of them joking around. Probably Cuthbert, joking around with one of his buddies, and
Yeah. Do you think Roland ever got with this?
no,
Don't-
I bet this is a lesson that he saw Cuthbert get, with the way that he's described Cuthbert being all talky and everything.
Sounds about right.
I mean, even in this part that we've covered earlier, as the Box Canyon talked about, it's one of the only times that Cuthbert was struck silent.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like the kind of kid that would not shut the hell up. So
Yeah.
I bet Roland witnessed this.
Most of us know someone like that. In our
Shut up,
lives.
you. You were just saying the other day I was loud. How dare you? So this next part here is a direct quote. That was your last note.
Yeah.
Okay. Jake pulled the handle. It resisted for a moment, then a piece of metal clunked down somewhere inside, and the door opened. The box itself was empty. The sign on the back wall read, "When all papers are gone, please take display copy." Jake worked it out of its wire holder, and they all gathered around. "What in God's name?" Susanna whispered. Susanna's whisper was both horrified and accusing. "What does it mean? What in God's name happened?" Below the newspaper's name, taking up most of the front page's top half, were screaming black letters. "Captain Trips, Superflu, rages unchecked. Government leaders may have fled county. Topeka hospitals jammed with sick. Dying millions, pray for cure." "Read it out loud," Roland said. "The letters are in your speech. I cannot make them all out, and I would know the story very well." Jake looked at Eddie, who nodded impatiently. Jake unfolded the newspaper, revealing a dot picture. Roland had seen pictures of this type. They were called photographs. Sorry, it's spelled way funky.
I'd say like photographs.
Photographs, yeah, because it's with an F. F-O-T-T-E-R-G-R-A-F-S. So not
'Cause
photographs, but photographs.
No, yeah, it's kind of like Aston, right? And he doesn't.
Yes.
He doesn't know. He's probably heard the word photograph once, and then this is his interpretation of it, which I always love those things.
Yeah. The picture, were called photographs, which shocked them all. It showed a lakeside city with its skyline in flames. "Cleveland fire burns unchecked," the caption read, beneath read. "Read, kid," Eddie told him. Susanna said nothing. She was already reading the story, the only one on the front page. Over his shoulder, Jake cleared his throat as if it was suddenly dry and began. My only note here is, what? Captain Trips?
Yeah, I can't tell you how happy this made me.
Oh, I know. I know.
If I were fist bumping something in this series, kind of like the Blaine, beating Blaine, that kind of thing, but this is a level of geekery and excitement for me that
This is that moment where you grab the nearest person and kiss them. You're so happy.
Yeah, so Captain motherfucking Trips, and then my next thought, show me Randall Flagg. Oh wow!
Boy.
This is huge. This is a crossover, unlike anything we've seen. It's in this series.
We will have to make a point here that warnings for any listeners: if you haven't read The Stand, there may be potential spoilers for The Stand, since obviously it is involved in this section of the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And going forward with this book, just be aware of that if you want to listen to The Stand or read The Stand without having it spoiled, if you haven't already, just a heads up. Be cautious.
So Brock says even Roland's father remarks that Roland was not quick. I bet Roland got plenty of beatings, but not for his mouth like Bert.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably right.
Roland got it for other things.
Yeah, certainly. All right, so moving on to subchapter 5 here. This is the last subchapter of this chapter. Then we'll be moving on for a couple subchapters in chapter 5. So this is a long one, too. So diving into subchapter 5 here, Jake is reading the byline, which has one writer along with AP staff being credited. Jake then explains to Roland what this means, that multiple people worked on this story. He then reads the text that says America's greatest crisis, and maybe even the whole world's, got worse overnight as the so-called superflu known as tube neck in the Midwest and Captain Trips in California continues to spread. It says the death toll can be estimated, or can only be estimated, but experts say estimate 20 to 30 million dead in the continental United States alone. Is one doctor's estimate. It talks about bodies being cremated at furnace factories and landfill sites. In Topeka, any survivors who have enough strength and are well enough are being told to bring their dead to one of 3 locations. One is a landfill, another is a park, and the last is a racetrack. It then talks about streets being blocked off and telling people directions on how to get to some of these places. Talks about blocked streets, including one street blocked that is blocked by a fallen Air Force transport plane. Which feels very Last of Us now. That's fresh in a lot of our minds. There's some fallen planes in that show for sure. Jake glances up at his friends, his eyes filled with fright, and looked back at the railway station and back at the paper. So yeah, this is double cool for me because this series is now crossing over with The Stand, my favorite standalone Stephen King book, but also because this is giving us new insights to The Stand. The Stand is a broad book with a lot going on, but honestly, if I'm given the option, I would love to read another 1,000-page book to give me more about the outbreak and the immediate aftermath of the outbreak, and this is giving us at least a small bite of that. So I'm loving this. This is geeking me the hell out because we saw the larger outbreak, but this is almost like King doing a short story where it's like, hey, I'm gonna just give you a couple pages that gives you other angles on Captain Trips, and sign me the fuck up for that.
That's what I put here for my note. It's Tales from the Stand, a collection of short stories in the Stand universe from all over the world. I would read it. Also, I just wanted to do a quick thing. I didn't think about this earlier. It says experts say 20 to 30 million in the continental U.S. alone.
Yeah,
that's back in whenever this is occurring.
Yeah.
Just to reference that, COVID-19 in the U.S. has taken 1.1.
Yeah.
Like, this is bad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But just like we know about Captain Trips, it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Let's see. So then my next note, I think this does a great job of conveying to the New York Tech members just how big and insane this event is. We as readers, we have the background. We know what The Stand is. Most of us have read The Stand. So we immediately know, once they say Captain Trips, we now have 1,000 pages in our head that knows that whole story, right? So we kind of know what's there. We had a lot of time. We spent half of that book getting to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But for the Artet members, they don't have that. They've never read Stephen King's The Stand.
No.
So, but they know what the 20th century looks like in America. So for them to read about things like mass cremations, mass burials, and multiple body disposal locations in a smallish town like Topeka would tell them that this is not a minor thing. This is the apocalypse. This is the end of the world. So I love that because it is very effective. King is being very effective here in giving us only a small bite of what The Stand ultimately is, but it's enough to where like it is a complete confusion. Like there's points in The Stand where they talk about like the government suppressing a lot of news and stuff, and there's not a lot of truth getting out there.
You even have like
King is
radio stations that try to broadcast the truth and they get shut down and everything and murdered. So like
so I think that like King's doing a good job of putting us at the right spot, because if that had come in where it's like there's only like rumors, like they wouldn't get a full idea because they wouldn't know. Again, they're just they're people that came from normal America.
And all three of them had lived through hoaxes. Like oh no, this is so bad, and then they find out, oh, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah,
we've had stuff like that in our lifetimes too. Is like we've
Y2K.
Y2K, that's the first thing that came to my mind. But also, don't you remember the bird flu being like this huge thing? Like, oh God, bird flu, we're all gonna die. And then like, did we? Like what happened to that? Kind of thing.
To be fair, though, pretty much the flu is a lot like what's the old saying about like monarchies? Every time a kid is born to the royal family, God rolls the dice.
Yeah, is it bad? Is it good? Is
it
okay.
And the flu's kind of that way because it's like we've still yet to ever have a repeat of the 1916 Spanish flu. But a bird flu, there's a possibility that could have turned into like a wide pandemic. So
no, but I'm just saying, like, and they lived through things like that. Where
Baraki says Ebola as well. Which
Ebola, that's another one.
Ebola scares the hell out of me though.
That's one that's like
I heard that,
and I heard like, oh, it's gonna get really bad for the United States, and then I'm like, here I am 5 years later. From like after it happens, and I'm like, where did that go?
Yeah. Luckily,
what happened to that?
Luckily, Ebola is not airborne.
No.
So it is nowhere near as dangerous as a lot of flus and stuff.
Like COVID-19, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Jake continues to read. One doctor from a local medical center points out that the death toll is horrifying, but it is just the tip of the iceberg. The doctor says that for every one person dead, this new flu strain, there are 6 or even a dozen more lying ill in their houses.
What did Roland just say? Roland just said that if you see 2 dead, there's going to be more.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I even read through your stuff this morning. I still didn't catch that. Oh, damn. That's eerie. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. She then says, as far as they can tell, the recovery rate is 0. She coughs as she told the reporter that she is not making any plans for the weekend. Jake moves on to read other news, including all commercial flights out of Forbes and Philip Billard Airport have been canceled. All Amtrak travel has been suspended, not just in Topeka, but all of Kansas. All Topeka schools are closed until further notice. It then tells the Topekans, which that's a fun one,
Topekans.
To expect brownouts and perhaps blackouts in the days and weeks ahead, as no one has answered from the the power company, but the recorded message says that they are doing a slow shutdown on the nuclear plant and will be brought back online once the crisis has passed. And the recording does not end with a goodbye or a thank you or a thank you for calling, but a quote, God will help us through our time of trial.
Ugh.
Yeah, I was about to say, imagine, because this isn't just like some lady in your neighborhood that has a knitting group that whatever. This is like a professional, like a nuclear
government facility.
A government facility, and that's what they put at the end of their message. Like, that's when shit's gone really sideways. When the like there's a Simpsons where I think it's one where the comet's coming and everyone runs out of the bar in the church, which for this episode, they're right next to each other, and they both trade places. The drunks go into the churches, and the church folk go into the bar.
Yep.
Like, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Jake reads on and sees on the following page, including pictures of a burnt-out truck near the Kansas Museum of Natural History. Traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge stalled bumper to bumper. Times Square filled with piles of corpses. One body in Times Square, Susannah saw, in the picture with the bodies in Times Square, Susannah saw one that is hung from a light pole, giving her nightmarish flashbacks to Ludd. It seems that Ludd-like hangings made their way to New York City. And then I got a direct quote here. It says, "When things get weird enough, someone always finds a lynch rope, it seems." Susannah reflected on how everything was echoing from one world to another, like the God drums.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easy for us to just kind of like flow with this because we've read The Stand, but like, imagine what this. I mean, because again, even like the outbreak as it happened, like it happens fast, but everyone that's in that world is able to kind of like try to grasp and process as it goes, even though it all happens in the course of a couple weeks. But these guys now, they're like coming into the third act of the movie for the and they're getting going from 0 to that right away. So they're just like, I can only imagine what this is doing to them mentally and emotionally.
Literally, my note here is I can't even begin to understand how they're feeling.
Yeah,
that's literally what my note is for this section. Because exactly that.
It's hard. It's easier for us because again, we kind of know like the fuller context. They don't. They last time once they realize they're in their world, they see this like. I don't know how you'd process that. It's it's kind of like COVID. There was that I think it was Germany. They had like a reality show where they had the people like boxed up in a house, and it went over the course of when COVID was happening. So they went in normal, and they came out like 2 weeks later, and like the whole world was like shut down, lockdowns, like and there was like news stories about that because it's like these people. It all happened.
They didn't experience it in real time like us. They came back to the pictures of Times Square being completely empty.
Yeah, they were
which was surreal for me to see that.
Yeah, and Vegas
being completely empty, Times Square, all those things, just being completely empty.
Yeah.
But also here, there's one other thing I just realized with what you're saying and with my note here about understand how they're feeling. The doctor says so far there's 0 survival rate.
Yeah.
So for all they know, they're the last humans in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's, how do you process that?
Yeah.
How do you process finding out? Like it would be the equivalent of me and you walked out of this studio, like this room, and out of your house and everything like that here. Walked outside and the complete world is just gone. Just annihilated. Everyone's gone.
Like The Simpsons where Homer goes in shopping for nuclear bunkers and he walks into one and starts eating the food and walks out and the nukes went off and then the whole place is blown up.
Oh, I've never seen that one.
I think it's a Halloween episode because everyone's dead. Yeah, so he's in there for like 10 minutes and he ends up starting to eat like the preserves and stuff and the rations. And he comes out and the dude's like a skeleton and like everyone everywhere is just wiped out. So my note here, what does this have to be like or let's see, what does this have to be like to our New York quartet? They have been thinking about friends and family. They have to be thinking about friends and family who they know who are likely dead from this.
Yeah.
Because like we don't have a date that we've been given yet. We're going to be getting it here in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But even Susannah, that's the furthest removed from this, she would know people that are likely would still be alive at this
Mm-hmm.
time. Like, this isn't like there's like 100-year gap of time here.
Right.
Like everyone, like Eddie and Susannah, there's like a 20 and some change year difference. So it's like, yeah, like there's a chance her parents are still alive. I mean, at this point. So it's
No,
pretty
her parents
wild.
aren't alive in the 60s. She inherited their fortune, remember?
Oh yeah, she has some family members though that.
Well,
would
even like what
potentially
about
still
Andrew, her driver, or any of her friends in the rallies and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Some of them were very young, like
Yeah.
protesting, their kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But also some of them have kids, and she probably knows them, and everything.
Yeah.
Her sister got married. Maybe her sister has kids, and she has nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
There's going to be people that she knows alive in this time.
Yeah. So King is just as brilliant here at building this cataclysmic dread and bonus points because he is doing it in such a condensed section. Again, the last one he spent of that nearly 1,000-page book, or somewhere in the realm of 1,000 pages, you'd probably guess about half of it is the outbreak and the immediate aftermath. If not more, maybe 2/3 of the book are like either the outbreak or the immediate after, like before like the establishment of like Boulder and Vegas. It's like a majority of it's the outbreak. So Jake. So then moving on here, Jake moves on to a portion saying that the federal leaders have been denying any existence of Captain Trips for as long as the quarantines may have actually helped, and now they were reportedly underground in underground retreats that were made for nuclear war. It mentions Vice President Bush and members of the Reagan cabinet haven't been seen in days, and Reagan has not been seen for longer. One Kansas representative that had the disease says that Reagan and the cronies went underground like Hitler at the end of World War II. It mentions fires in Cleveland, Indianapolis, and Terre Haute. An explosion was so large they had to clarify that it was a non-nuclear explosion that happened near Cincinnati's Riverfront Stadium. Jake let the paper drop from his hands. The wind caught it and carried it away. Oy snagged one piece of it by stretching out his neck and trotted it over to Jake like a dog playing fetch with a toy. Jake says he doesn't want it. Susannah says that at least they know where all the people are, as she took the paper from Oy. It was the last 2 pages, and it was crammed with obituaries printed in the smallest type that she had ever seen. No pictures, no cause of death, no service announcements, just names. The jaggedness of the type is what convinced her it was real. Then she thought how they tried to honor their dead even at the end. And it does mention that, like, it says, like, so-and-so, beloved of so-and-so. So that's why when I just condense that down by saying names, because that's all it basically says. Is,
survived by so-and-so.
Yeah, like, it isn't, like, full obituaries. It's more of just, like...
Tad, Peter.
Yeah, pretty much.
Rocky, Mike.
So it's, my note here, too much shock for Eddie to play the I told you so about Reagan being president. Had to point that out because those two have had those conversations, and this would be some definitive proof because I know she was probably joking, but Susannah has said that she doesn't believe Eddie that the actor Ronald Reagan became president. So I had to point out that Eddie's probably at least seeing the writing on the wall that now is probably not the time to say I told you so.
Well, I bet you if you take someone from 2007, they wouldn't believe that Donald Trump would be president either. It happens, like.
Yeah, that's true. I think because Trump has a couple mentions in this book. Eddie references him because Susannah's like, "Who's that?"
Yeah,
and he's like, "Yeah, it's some like
millionaire." Yeah.
I can't remember. He calls him like landowner or like whatever property buyer in New York or something. So
yeah.
So it happens.
My only note here is also interesting. They named the president. They don't do that in The Stand, do they?
They allude to it,
but I think because the president actually has lines at one point, he's on TV giving a speech. I think King purposely doesn't name him.
Sparky says, I think there's something Sparky says that makes you. Well, it wouldn't have been Reagan because they moved it to 90, so that would have been H.W. Bush. Because he calls him like a clown or something like that. There's some ways he talks derisively about the president,
but he never names him though.
No.
It's interesting that we're getting names here, but not.
And this is also Reagan, so that's the other. I guess that's the other thing is that this ultimately doesn't line up with either Stand because the original Stand is the late 70s. The remastered, the uncut version comes out in 1990. This is in between the two. So
It is.
that's actually something I never thought about.
We're about to find out when it is right here in this next section.
Yeah. So not sure if any of the explosions or fires are Trash Can Man related. He was locked up when it all went down, and the only one that we saw him do was basically done so far past anyone being around that it was a ghost town basically. So there wouldn't have been newspapers to report it. But I have to think with the fires, I'm like, maybe that's Trashy.
Trashy wasn't locked up. He was working at the car wash.
No, he was locked up. It talks about it. It isn't like Lloyd where he's like locked up, but it talked about how he was like helping in the infirmary and stuff, and
they released him because they said that he was cured. They needed his bed, and he was working at the car wash.
No, car wash is before he gets locked up again.
I thought the car wash was after.
No, It was only this last time that I actually even caught it, because again, it doesn't get played up like it does with Lloyd. But this last time going through, I was like, oh, it mentions it, but it mentions like he was in like minimum security and he was actually being used as like he was helping the infirmary and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if it even gives you an idea of how he actually got out. So let's see here. Yeah. So, and then my last note here before we move on, I love such a small detail, being what convinced Susannah. I've heard that from so many people where some small thing is what makes some trauma snap home into reality for them. It is always just some weird small thing. It's never like whatever. It's always just something like that. Like the jaggedness of the text is what's just made it real for her. Like I've heard that from real people where it's like, they've suffered these traumas and, like, it isn't like, oh, I'm watching the tower fall on the TV on 9/11, but it's like, waking up the next day and seeing my husband's closet that I suddenly realize like he'll never get dressed again. Like, it's always just these weird small things. A lot of times it's something about the brain, probably because you're in shock a lot of times when it comes to these traumatic events. But so I really love that. It feels really, really true that Susannah, kind of such a small and almost meaningless thing, is it really makes it real for her. Susannah folded the paper, and on the last page was a picture of Jesus with sad eyes and hands outstretched, and 3 words printed large above him: "Pray for us." She looked up at Eddie accusingly and handed him a paper and tapped the date, June 24th, 1986, which is 1 year before Eddie was drawn into Roland's world. He held the paper for a long time, rubbing the date with his finger as though it might change. Then he looks up and says he can't explain anything in this area, but he can tell them that things were fine in New York when he left, and he asked Roland to back him up. And Roland says there was nothing about New York that seemed fine to him, but the people he saw did not seem to be survivors of a plague like this, which just a pause there for, I love that, because that's just so Roland. He's like, no, man, there's nothing fine about the city I saw that you lived in. Because Roland was not overly fond of what he's seen of our world for the most part. Eddie says that there was Legionnaire's disease and AIDS, of course, and Susannah asks if that's a sex one, largely suffered by, quote, fruits and drug addicts. And Eddie tells her that calling gay people fruits is not something they do in this time. Jake says, oh, so this never happened. And then I have a direct quote here. It says, "But it did," Roland said. "It happened in June sowing of the year 1986. And and here we are in the aftermath of that plague. If Eddie was right about the length of time that has gone by, remember, flashing back, Eddie was looking at the buildings, saying that, you're not really seeing cracking and stuff. So this is like maybe some months of mistreatment, but this hasn't been like not taken care of for years. So Eddie's little CSI there. We didn't necessarily talk a lot about it, but I think that's what Roland's referring to here. The plague of this super flu was in the past June sowing. We're in Topeka, Kansas, in the reaping of 86. That's the when of it. As to the where, all we know is it is not Eddie's. It might be yours, Susannah, or yours, Jake, because you left your worlds before this arrived. He tapped the date on the paper and then looked at Jake. "You said something to me once, and I doubt you remember, but I do. It's one of the most important things anyone has ever said to me. Go then. There are other worlds than these."
Yeah.
So, I love the idea of Eddie getting accused here, because I think this is such a natural thing. Insofar as you can say that like time travel is natural, but if you were to take a bunch of people from different time periods and jam them together, and then something like this were to show up, like say you put some group together and the person that was from post 9/11 didn't mention 9/11, and then 9/11 got exposed and people from the 90s or 80s or whatever, dude, they're gonna look at that guy and go, what the fuck, dude, you didn't tell us about this? Like, this just feels so real to me. So I really love this. And Susannah, she's kind of angry. She's like, whatever, and I wonder if she's like wondering if like Eddie was like trying to protect them from this truth or whatever, because it seems like she's believing that like Eddie should have known about this and maybe didn't tell him or something. So I love it though. It feels very real. I don't know, not necessarily like the 7 stages of grief, but the accusation, because hey, you're from.
It's the shock. It's the shock of it.
Yeah, you're from 87. You should have known this. What the fuck is going on?
Why
here?
didn't you tell us?
Yeah, exactly. So love that. I do wonder though if Jake or from 87 if Susannah would have come at him with the same attitude, just because she kind of treats him a little bit a certain way, right? I wonder if Eddie's getting the husbandly treatment here from Susannah a little bit. And he's also an adult, right? He can handle it. But yeah, what do you got?
Just what you covered already. Roland dogging on Eddie's world, saying nothing in your city seemed very fine to me.
I just Roland, because there was like all kinds of things. I mean, he talks shit on the cops, like these are not gunslingers. Like they kind of look like gunslingers, but look how sloppy they are. Just I don't know. This is like the other side of the fish out of water side of Roland that we all love so much. This is it where I don't know. I hope this is done somewhat deadpan, at least that line from Roland, like when Flanagan does it. I hope that's like a deadpan line where it's like, no, your world wasn't fine, but there
was nothing fine about it.
But there was but there's no plague though. So at least he backed Eddie up a little bit. Roland also came at us with a big one here. There are other worlds than these, but I've always pictured that as other worlds like ours versus Roland's, not necessarily other versions of our own world. Roland is kind of opening up a whole new fucking can of worms here.
It's the multiverse.
Yeah, it is, and it's way more common now. I mean, back when we read this in the early 2000s, you and I, we weren't as heavily versed in multiverse stuff, but like this is not at all what I thought of when I would hear Jake's line or read Jake's line, or it recurred to me as I was sitting around, because it is one of the greatest lines of the book. It never occurred to me that like there's multiple New Yorks.
There was the question on whether or not this is Roland's world is just our world 2,000 years in the future.
Yeah, like post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
Well, we have hints of it. We have the Beatles. We have a gas station pump.
Yeah.
And guns and stuff like that. And there seems to be hints that it's our world, kind of thing. So finding out that it is a different world altogether, like Roland
like multiverse,
basically confirming not only a different world, but confirming the multiverse, that hey, this might be Susannah, so Susannah and Eddie might not have come from the same world.
Yeah.
That's a big bombshell.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot in this section we're covering that is some new shit hitting us as readers here. Like we've never the Browning poem coming in is like, wait, what the fuck's going on? Then you reference a stand, and now you're referencing a like, what the fuck, man? King is hitting us a lot here. In these
not to mention just not even world building on top of that. For the current situation, but also we're getting Roland's backstory stuff thrown at us at the same time.
Yeah.
Susan. Who the fuck's Susan? Roy, DePape, Jonas, the witch on the hill. Wait a minute. What is all this?
Yeah,
we don't know anything about you. You summed it up perfectly. A lot of crumbs, but no full details.
No, not a lot.
We're not getting a lot of details here with all this stuff going on. This is hitting us hard in the face right now.
Yeah. And then my last bit of that note is, so the New York Tip might all be from different versions of our world, and they may have never shared the same existence with each other. That's huge. Like that, and it's like, and honestly, I may have even breezed over this a little bit, because I feel like we were doing this show when people talked about the idea that the three weren't from the same world.
Yeah.
I think I've always just assumed they're all from the same different time period, certainly.
We get the feeling that they are, because Jake follows Eddie.
Yeah, exactly. So there's things
younger
like
Eddie, but still Eddie. So we think that Susannah's there back in the 60s. She's there.
Yeah. And we earlier in this was it this book or the tail end of the last book where they talked about levels of the tower. I think it was Blaine. So it could have either been earlier in this book or the late last book. But that, and obviously
it's both. He mentions it in the end of book 3 and in beginning of book 4.
Yeah, there's a lot, man. This is it feels like we're getting a fire hose of information a little bit here, and a lot that we've inadvertently crammed all in the same section. Not that we would try to break it up, but the way the cookie has crumbled, we're covering a lot of new concepts and ideas here.
And then also on top of that, all of that, the cherry on top is that, oh fuck, by the way, we're in a world where Captain Trips has destroyed the world.
Yeah, and like I said, I just made the realization date wise. I've never thought of that until while we've been recording this, that like This is between the two actual stands.
Abridged and unabridged.
Unabridged, yeah. Unabridged is 1990, and then I think it was 77 or 78, something like that for the original version. This is 86, so it's like, dude, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
Eddie sees it as, so moving on here, going down the line, last bit of this section, Eddie sees it as more riddles and is not happy. Roland points out that Jake died once but is standing in front of them. He asks if they doubt his story and says that he knows that they have doubted his honesty from time to time. Eddie says that he lies when it suits his purposes, but he was too fucked up to lie when this came up. So he does believe him. Roland is surprised that he is hurt by Eddie's statement here, but moved on because it was true.
Yeah.
I love that. Roland says that there are many possible worlds and infinite doors leading into them. This is one of those worlds, and the Thinny they are hearing is one of those doors. Eddie asks how big it is, and Roland signals that he doesn't know, kind of throws his hands up a little bit. Susannah says that they are not just near it, but came through it to get into this world. Roland says that they may have. He asks if any of them felt vertigo or nausea, and none of them had, but they all were very focused on the riddling. Roland says that Thinnies are unnatural things like sores on the skin of existence and only exist because things are wrong. Eddie then kind of finishes the thought by saying that things are wrong at the Dark Tower. Roland agrees and says that disease like this or worse could spread. The first Thinny he ever saw was when he was young near the town called Hambry. Jake points out that they are off the path of the beam and it is not lined up with Blaine anymore. Eddie asks if that matters. The tower is in every world. Roland says yes, but it may not be accessible in every world. Eddie remembers buildings in New York City who had elevators that had restricted floors that you had to have keys or key cards to get to. Roland then says they needed to find the beam again. Eddie says he is sold and asks which way, and Roland says the way that they were going. So, kind of moving on from the heavier stuff now and actually starting to talk about, okay, where are we going now? So, some forward progress a bit here. A lot of big things here in terms of mechanics of this world. Thinnies are a new doorway, it seems, and may have ended up how they ended up here. But there is also some doubt there because it seems like there's some effects and they didn't necessarily feel those. So,
yeah.
I don't know. And again, it's still strange to me that Blaine's map said Topeka. I don't think there's a way to get my mind around exactly what the mechanics of this actually are. So, what do you got next?
I have a question. Something is wrong with the Dark Tower. Is this new? I thought that Roland so far just wanted to get there and not that something was necessarily inherently wrong with the Dark Tower. I don't remember when we actually find out like what the quest is to get to the Dark Tower because something is wrong. This isn't the first reference of that, is it?
I don't think so. That's a tough one, though, because I think that the problem is it's one of those things that we all might just insert into there where it's like get to the Dark Tower to save it. It's so like quintessential storytelling that maybe we just inserted that ourselves. So I honestly don't know.
Because I just remember us in the book clubs going through Drawing of the Three and even Wastelands. Whenever they ask him about the Dark Tower, he dodges the question. Even Susannah calls him out on this.
Yeah.
Is that, hey, we haven't heard, like, why are we going where we're going? What's your story? Like, what's going on? And he always says another time, not now. I'm going insane. We're on top of a train.
Yeah.
Blaine is a pain. There's all these different excuses that he keeps giving to them that we don't hear it. But I honestly don't remember if we've ever heard that.
This might be
the first time we hear that, hey, by the way, the Dark Tower's in trouble. And so it's just like, it really kind of hit me this time, and I'm just like, fuck, dude, we just finished covering, we finished Wastelands, and I don't remember Roland ever telling the content, hey, by the way, the Dark Tower's in trouble.
Yeah, no, it might be a new thing. But again, I think it's just one of those things storytelling-wise that it's so easy to just add in, like,
there's a problem.
You're going to the Dark Tower to save the universe or save the whatever. It just it feels so natural that maybe I've just presumed something wrong, and it's the first time it's actually been.
I just remember in Drawing of the Three where Roland talks about going to the Dark Tower, and I remember specifically putting a note in one of our documents here for a book club and being like, no, I can't put that because he didn't say that the Dark Tower was in trouble, and I know we didn't say it in book one.
Yeah.
So I just full circle now. It's come back, and I'm just like, I don't think we've said it.
Yeah, it might be the first time.
All right.
So my last note here, Eddie gets rolling with quite a shot as well.
Yeah, you lie when it serves your purpose.
Oh man, yeah, Eddie getting a getting a hit there.
Yeah.
You sunk my battleship. All right.
I like that Roland tried to just like, yeah, it's true.
It's true though. Yeah,
he just kind of, hey, all right, you got me.
He's hurt by it, but he can't really like argue that it's wrong. All right, so now we're moving over to chapter 5, titled Turnpikin', or subtitled Turnpikin'.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and dive into subchapter 1 here.
So Roland walks to the end of the platform and then tells them to be ready as there are more dead. Jake asks if they are runny. Roland frowns, then his face clears and he realizes what Jake is asking. He says that they are dry. Jake says, that's all right then. There are 6 corpses and one of them is a small child. Summer spent exposed to the elements and the animals made it to Jake look more like a child mummy you would find in an Incan pyramid. Jake figures from the faded blue outfit that it was a boy, but it is impossible to be sure. He thinks, why did the dead baby cross the road? Because it was stapled to the superflu. There's a line for you. Jake notices the child is in better shape than the 5 adults around it. The 5 are just a little more than skeletons with hair. One of the men is clutching a Samsonite suitcase that looked like the one Jake's parents owned. As with the baby, all the skeletons had no eyes, just dark sockets. And then a quote from the book. What took you so long, kid? The dead man who's still clutching the suitcase seemed to be asking. Been waiting for you. It's been a long, hot summer. Where are you guys hoping to go? Jake wondered, what were in the crispy crap did you think you might be safe from? Well, just where in the crispy crap did you think you might be safe enough? Des Moines, Sioux Falls, Fargo, the moon? And I just put here, such a child thing from Jake, but at the same time, a callback to when they found the mummy in the place. Jake said he knew he would be more freaked out if it was runny. The runny bit is what I was talking about. Just like asking Roland, are they runny? And he's like,
yeah.
What? Oh, no, they're dry.
Yeah.
So, and everything. But then at the end here, with what I just covered, dark thoughts from Jake, where he's kind of like, damn, where were they going? Like, and then this kid just sitting out here, he's thinking about how they look and like the condition that they're in and everything.
Yeah. Sorry. I thought my thing was freezing on me here. The counter on the thing froze. It was suddenly not moving. I was like, what's going on? So,
on the stream?
Yeah, like I think everything's fine, but on my screen, like recently my screen's been like locking during our streams. I don't know what the hell's going on. Sorry. What where are we at?
We got your note here in the end of the first section.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Most of us go our whole lives without seeing dead bodies apart from funerals, so I don't blame him for being creeped out a bit.
Oh yeah, it's a kid thing for sure. Yeah,
yeah. It's yeah. I guess as a longtime horror fan though, I guess I don't get the fear of gooey bits.
Of course you wouldn't.
Hey, I guess the kid's never seen a zombie movie, right?
Yeah. So going on, they go down the stairs with Roland in the lead and Jake still holding Susannah's hand. Oi being so long bodied, he seemed to be taking each step in 2 stages like a double trailer taking speed bumps. What?
It's a funny image.
Susannah asks...
you know what I picture is Slinky Dog.
Yeah.
From Toy Story. That's what I'm picturing here.
I picture your mom's wiener dogs.
King calls out dachshunds for Billy Bumblers every once in a while. He usually says badger, raccoon, and then every once in a while dachshund gets thrown in there too. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, Slinky Dog though, when it's talking about like multi-steps, or it seems like Slinky Dog.
Absolutely. To me. Eddie says to slow down and then he wants to check the crypt spaces. Susannah asks what those are, and Jake shrugs. Roland doesn't know either. This is a quote from the book. Susannah switched her attention to Eddie. I only asked Sugar Pie because it sounds like unpleasant. On-pleasant, not unpleasant, unpleasant. Like calling Negroes blacks or gay folks fruits. I know I'm just a poor, ignorant pickaninny from the dark ages of 1964, but... Wait, 64?
Yeah. Months after Kennedy's assassination.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Eddie interrupts...
I do think King messed it up at one point and called it 63, but this is actually right.
Okay.
It's like... it's not even 6. It's like 4 or 5 months after
9
Kennedy.
months after Kennedy was assassinated.
No, we placed it in like February. Is when we actually covered the Andrew the driver and stuff.
Yeah.
We covered months wise. It would have put her in February.
When Andrew says that he's the last gunslinger.
Yeah. So 64 is right, but there's one point in the last couple books that it mentioned 63. I think King just messed up, but here he's got it right.
Eddie interrupts her and says there and points to a rank of signs marking the parking spots closest to the station. There are 2 signs posted to each pole, and Jake says the top one says is a wheelchair, and the bottom one has a warning about a fine for parking in handicap spots. Susannah is very happy about this, saying how hard it is to park, get over the curb, or get their chair through the shop doors. Even though it was the end of the world, most of what Eddie called the crib spaces were empty. There were only 2 cars without wheelchair symbols in the license plates. So people who had permission to be there.
Yeah.
Jake guessed that respecting the crib spaces was just one of the things that got hold of people, like putting zip codes on letters, parting your hair, or brushing your teeth before breakfast, so they just didn't park there, even though they were empty and they were trying to run from the super flu.
Yeah.
I love Susannah getting upset with Eddie about crib spaces, then going on a full rant about parking as a handicapped person.
Yeah.
It's just the kind of thing like...
It would have been bad in the 60s,
Oh, yeah.
man. I mean, there wasn't any, like... laws about like ramps,
the
or,
Disability Act.
None of that existed.
Yeah.
So it would have been freaking hard, man. That would have been tough living back in those days. And that's not even considering the fact that she's also black in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly.
That adds another element on top of it.
Yeah.
So good idea by Eddie here. I remember still being a bit concerned that they had lost the wheelchair. Actively reading this part, because I knew immediately when he starts talking about this, I'm like, I know what he's... I mean, it's pretty obvious for us, right? Or at least it was for me. I'm like, oh, cool. He's going to go see if he can find a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then obviously in the 80s, this is going to be a massive upgrade because 1960s wheelchairs were massive and heavy. We're now in the late 80s. That's going to put us pretty much to what modern wheelchairs are. They haven't really changed much in the last 30 or so years. Like
couple little things, yeah.
Basic wheelchairs. I mean, you're using like kind of like decent aluminum. You're using like the nylon, like,
not wood.
Yeah, not heavy freaking big wood ones
or
with
steel
like with metal wheels and like hard steel wheels. Yeah, nothing like that at all. So I was kind of stressing a bit. Again, I still had it in my head, maybe something will happen. Wizard in glass. Maybe there's a wizard that can grant her legs back or something. That was some of my thoughts going into this book. But yeah, here I'm like, okay, at least till we get to the wizard, Eddie's going to find us a wheelchair here. So I was a little bit happy about that.
My note here, I think I'm kind of answering my own question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I don't think we really get anything like this in the stand, that people still respected like certain rules despite, the end of the world. You just reread it. Can you think of anything? I thought of one as the
there are, and it's
the people dying in the church. Like they congregated and just died in the church instead of wandering.
There's in the church. I mean, honestly, even during the breakdown of stuff, there's a lot of the military discipline that goes way longer than it probably should have. And I think there's a few minor things mentioned in the Boulder section where it's just like somebody thinks to themselves, like, how funny is it that why are we still doing X, Y, or Z? It's nothing massive, nothing like not parking in handicap spots. Like, but I think there's just some minor things that either Stu or maybe probably old Baldy noticed where it's like, wonder why we're still whatever. Like, it just,
why are we still doing A, B, and C?
But the shit gets so ingrained in us that But I think there are some, I couldn't give you any details outside of like the military discipline it
lasts a while.
It is interesting because in some cases, I mean, they even like kill their commanding officers, but then they still keep acting like in the chain of command. Like it's weird. It's just we're just we have those things that get in our heads, man, and it's hard to break them. It's hard to break them.
Eddie says he thinks he found what he's looking for and is still carrying Susannah on his hip. A thing he wouldn't have been able to do for an extended period of time even a month ago. We mentioned earlier in the sections we covered about Eddie putting on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Eddie hurries over to a boat of a Lincoln. Strapped to the roof is a complicated-looking racing bike, but poking out of the half-open trunk is a wheelchair, like Tad said. Jake notices several other wheelchairs in the other cars in the crib spaces, quotes on that. Some strapped to roofs, some in the back of vans or station wagons, and one ancient-looking one in the bed of a pickup. Eddie sets Susannah down and examines the straps and a locking bar holding the wheelchair in place. Eddie draws the Ruger and says, "Fire in the hole," but before any of them can cover their ears, he shoots the lock on the security bar. And the shot rolled into the silence and then echoed back. The warbling sound of the Thinny returned with it. Sounds Hawaiian, doesn't it? Jake thinks. Then he grimaces in distaste. Half an hour ago, he wouldn't have believed that a sound could be as physically upsetting as, say, rotting meat, but he believes it now. And then a quote here. He looked up at the turnpike signs. From the angle, he could see only their tops. But that was enough to confirm that they were shimmering again. It throws some kind of fill, Jake thought, the way mixers and vacuum cleaners make static on the radio or TV, or the way the cyclotron gadget made their hair on my arm stand up when Mr. Kingery brought it to class and then asked for volunteers to come up and stand next to it. Eddie wrenches the locking bar aside and uses Roland's knife to cut the elastic cords. He takes out the wheelchair, examines it, and unfolds it. Voila, he says. Susannah has propped herself up on one hand. Jake thinks she looks like the woman in this Andrew Wythe painting he liked called Christina's World.
Which I have on the screen now.
Perfect, thank you. Just a woman laying
In a field. Looks like there might be a man in that field. That's the kind of field that maybe Randall Flagg might find himself in.
Nope. She says it looks, talk about the wheelchair, it looks so light, little and light. Eddie says modern technology at its finest. It's why they fought in Vietnam and said to hop in. He bends to get her, and she doesn't resist him, but her face was frowning as if she expected the chair to collapse. She runs her hands over the arms of the new ride, and her face gradually relaxes. So the reason why I quoted Jake here is because I don't know why, but the Thinny is really upsetting. It's unsettling to me.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that they can see, like, the heat haze and stuff like that, that's not normal. That's weird, and that's very off-putting that Jake's just like, oh, I wonder if I can see. Yep, there it is. I can still see it.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And Eddie not giving anyone time to plug their ears, much like Roland a little bit ago.
Yeah.
At least they're outdoors, I suppose.
Notice that Oi doesn't look at Eddie with distrust, only Roland.
You know why? It's because Roland doesn't have a full hand to attack. So he's like, I don't know. This guy is dangerous.
Oh, he's already been attacked.
And I do, unfortunately, lost the soundbite that I had saved for the saw sound. I forgot that it gets brought up again here. I should have kept it on the soundboard, but I did not.
Hashtag Tad is terrible. I remember being so relieved that they found a new wheelchair for Susannah my first time through. I was like you, like, fuck, what are they going to do when we found out in the end of book 3 that they left it behind.
Yeah.
And then it's mentioned again here that they didn't have it when they were trying to get off of Blaine's carcass and everything. It's like, fuck, what are they going to do? And then it's like, oh, they're just going to go find one.
Yeah.
It's the stand world. There's things just laying around that people can pick up like they talk about in the stand.
Yeah.
So that's what, and it's funny that it's Eddie that thinks of that just like instantly, not Susannah, who is the handicapped person.
Yeah.
It's Eddie that thinks of a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he knows this world, right? It works out. It works out that way. Let's see. Did I lose my spot? I did. Let's actually just move on. We're
Okay.
good. Go to the we can go to the next section. We're
Sounds
running
good.
we're running lower on time than I thought we might.
Oh, geez, I didn't realize what time it was. Jake wanders off down another row of cars, running his fingers over their hood, leaving trails of dust. This section is long, Tad. Do we want to stop here and
Let's
cover this again?
I think we can go through it.
Okay. It's all right. Let me. Jake wanders off down another row of cars, running his fingers over their hoods, leaving trails of dust. Oi padding after him, pausing once to lift the leg and squirt on a tire. Susannah asked Jake if the cars made him homesick, and that he probably didn't even think that he would see an honest-to-God American automobile again. Jake considers this and decides she wasn't right. It had never crossed his mind he would remain in Roland's world forever. Never seeing another car wouldn't bother him, but he didn't think that would happen. There was a certain vacant lot in New York where he had come from, on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 46th Street. Once it had been a deli, and now it was just rubble, weeds, broken glass, and a rose. Just a single wild rose growing in a lot where some condos were supposed to be built at some point. Jake has the idea that there weren't any other roses like the one growing anywhere on Earth. Eddie had dreamed of roses by the billions near the Dark Tower, but Jake had suspected that this one rose was different from all of them even. And until that rose's fate was decided, he wasn't done with the world of cars, TVs, and policemen, and wanted to know if you had any the policeman wanted to know if you had any identification or what your parents' names were. And speaking of his parents, I may not be done with them either, Jake thinks. The idea hurried his heart with a mixture of hope and alarm.
Yeah.
I just have one note. Jake's parents? What? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he ever thought he'd be back in his world.
Yeah.
And now that he kind of is, there's suddenly a thing where a closed door doesn't look as closed as it did,
Yeah.
20 minutes ago.
Exactly. And King reminding us all about the rose that we had obviously forgotten about with everything that has happened.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Ready to go on?
Yeah.
Okay. They stop halfway down the row of cars, and Jake stares blankly across a wide street, Gage Boulevard, he assumes. As he considers these things, Roland and Eddie catch up to them. Eddie says how great this new lighter wheelchair is going to be after pushing the Iron Maiden for months, and jokes that you could probably puff it along, and he blows a breath at the back of the wheelchair to try and demonstrate this. Jay thinks about telling Eddie they were probably electric ones, then realizes what Eddie probably already thought about, that the batteries would be dead. Susannah ignores Eddie and says Jake didn't answer her question about being homesick. He says nah, and then he says he is curious if he recognizes all the cars. He says that if this is a different world than theirs, then the cars might be able to tell them, but he might not recognize some of them as he is from 77 and Eddie is from 87. Well, Eddie lived in 86 is what I mean.
Yeah.
Eddie explains that he was high most of the time in 86, but he starts to push Susannah along the rows. And he starts pointing out the cars that he recognizes, listing them all. Jake is as amused and a little touched by the look of wonder on Susannah's face. Most of these cars probably look as futuristic to her as Buck Rogers' scout ships. That made Jake wonder how Roland felt about them. He looked around for Roland, and quote here from the book, "The gunslinger showed no interest in the cars at all. He was gazing across the street into the park toward the turnpike, except Jake didn't think he was actually looking at any of those things. Jake had an idea that Roland was simply looking into his own thoughts. If so, the expression on his face suggested that he wasn't finding anything good there." Eddie continues naming cars, comes to one and says, "Imperial, good shape, but must be older than God." And Susannah cuts him off saying, "Hey, to watch it." Jake, because she recognizes it, and Jake picks up a bit of real asperity in her voice. She is upset because she recognizes that one and it looks new to her. Eddie apologizes and keeps naming cars until he stops at one and says it's a Takuro Spirit. He's never heard of that one and asks Jake, and Jake shakes his head. Jake thinks smart of Jake to think about the different models of cars, trying to put that. And Eddie putting his foot in his mouth is always funny. And then getting a little bit of a Susannah being fish out of water here.
Yeah.
Out of time, I should say.
Also, one anachronistic error here. Stephen King mentions the Ford Explorer. Those are not invented until 1990. So
maybe in this world they were.
Maybe, or it was that it come 97. Explorers just seemed so goddamn ubiquitous. And
Yeah.
it became one of the biggest selling things in like the 90s.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they were everywhere. So I just wonder if King just slipped it in there, not realizing
Naming
that,
a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
didn't exist in 86. But
Yep.
yeah, indeed. I that was my first car.
It was your first car
as Explorer, so I always kind of know a little bit more about them than other things.
Absolutely. Eddie continues pushing Susan towards Gage Boulevard. Roland was with them, but still mostly off in his own private world. Walking when they walked and stopped when they stopped. Just shy of the automated entrance, Eddie stops again, and Susannah says that they will be dead before they reach the turnpike. This time he didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to hear her. He was looking at a bumper sticker. Jake stopped and looked too. Oi dropped his Jake stooped down to look at it. Oi dropped his head on his knee, and Jake scratched him absently. See, Oi's a good boy. Jake reached out to touch the bumper sticker up to make sure it's real. Kansas City Monarchs, it says. The O in the Monarchs was a baseball with speed lines making it look like it was leaving the park. Eddie says to check him if he's wrong, but shouldn't it be Kansas City Royals? George Brett and all. Jake nods, and he says he even recognizes George as he was a younger player in Jake's win, and he must have been fairly old in Eddie's. Susannah says, "Isn't it Kansas City Athletics?" and sounds bewildered. Roland is ignoring all of this. He's still cruising in his own personal ozone lair. Eddie says to Susannah that by 86, the Athletics had moved to Oakland. He says he asked Jake if there's a minor league team, and Jake says the minor league for the Royals is still the Royals, and they play in Omaha.
Isn't because we've looked into actually you can get hats because was it the Negro League that was the Monarchs? Because you can go to a website and actually buy Monarchs hats today. Because I always
the Kansas City Monarchs.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's a fun little one. If you ever want to buy a hat to be Dark Tower, you can do that.
And just my only note here is I remember this throwing me for a loop was the stand. Not in our world. King never gave us a hint of that during the stand, right?
No, there's nothing in the stand because I've actually thought after Dark Tower, I've gone through and looked is there anything in here anywhere that would be something that doesn't fit our world?
Where they mention a Takuro Spirit or anything like that?
Nozzle or no, nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. So yeah, nothing in the stand that would make me think that. But yeah, again, I didn't think about it while I was doing the notes though. Is the dates are different in this one, so it's like,
so
who knows?
there we go. I'm going to read this last part. It's taken directly from the book. And although he didn't know about the others, Jake himself went on with a lighter heart. Maybe it was stupid, but he was relieved. He didn't believe that this terrible plague was waiting up ahead for his world because there were no Kansas City monarchs in his world. Maybe that wasn't enough information upon which to base a conclusion, but it felt true, and it was an enormous relief to be able to believe that his mother and father weren't slated to die of a germ people called Captain Trips, and be burned in a landfill or something. Except that wasn't quite a sure thing, even if this wasn't the 1986 version of his 1997 world. Because even if this awful plague had happened in a world where there were cars called Ch4 spirits, and George Brett played for the Kansas City the KC Monarchs, Roland said the trouble was spreading. That things like the super flu were eating through the fabric of existence, like battery acid eating its way into a piece of cloth. The gunslinger had spoken of Time's Pool, a phrase which had at first struck Jake as romantic and charming, but suppose the pool was growing stagnant and swampy, and suppose these Bermuda Triangle type things Roland called Thinnies, once great rarities, were becoming the ruler rather than the exception. Suppose, and here was a hideous thought, one guaranteed to keep you lying awake until way past 3. All of reality was sagging as the structural weakness of the Dark Tower grew. Suppose there came a crash, one level falling onto the next, and the next, and the next, until when Eddie had grasped his shoulder and squeezed, Jake had to bite his tongue to keep from screaming. "You're giving yourself the hoodoos," Eddie said. "What do you know about it?" Jake asked. That sounded rude, but he was mad. From being scared or being seen into, he didn't know. Didn't much care either. "When it comes to hoodoos, I'm an old hand," Eddie said. "I don't know exactly what's on your mind, but whatever it is, this would be an excellent time to stop thinking about it." That, Jake decided, was probably good advice. They walked across the street together toward Gage Park, and one of the greatest shocks of Jake's life. What is with us being able to unnaturally end on these great cliffhangers?
King's good at cliffhangers.
Yeah, but we always end up finding... We didn't plan to end here.
No, it's true, but King does it, man. And Ka has it all under control.
Yeah. My only note here really is good on Eddie pulling Jake back, because that was giving me the creeps. It gave Jake the hoodoos. It gave me the hoodoos.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And if there's anyone that's in their head a lot, in their own head quite a bit, I think Eddie's the champion at that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that will wrap us for this. For this section, we will start back up in subchapter 2 next time, which will be in basically about a month from now, unless things change. We have kind of debated flip-flopping them again because of our 3-episode month. We now have it to where book clubs are the first episode and not the second, and that just feels unnatural to me. But
at some point.
We'll see. At some point, we're probably going to flip-flop them, so we're back with roundtables first and book clubs second. But it might be next month, so maybe it'll be a little bit over a month before we're back.
Well, we did just talk about next month. 2 weeks from now is Wind Through the Keyhole.
Went through the keyhole, yeah. So September is the question, though. So
if September is the question.
If we flip-flop it in September, we may be a little bit over a month, or if we keep it the same, we'll be close to a month before we're back for when we finish this up. And then Brocky said, nothing to suggest that Captain Trips only happened on one level of the tower, and that's definitely true. It certainly seems that Trips has happened on multiple levels for sure. But let's go ahead and hit the outro stuff real quick. We have, if you want to subscribe to us, you can do that on any podcasting service of your choice. You can stream us on Spotify or Stitcher. You can join us live here at the live streams over at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver, like everyone here in the chat did today. A lot of fun to have you all with us. And then if you want to find the show notes, we don't have show notes for this episode, but all things Dark Tower Palaver, the hub of the wheel of Dark Tower Palaver is the darktowerpalaver.com website. Find the links for everything over there. If you want to support the show, you can do that at Patreon at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. And if you want to contact us, Peter can let you know the best ways to do that.
Best way is through email. Our old email is darktowerpalaver@gmail.com, or our new email show at darktowerpalaver.com. And then our Twitter is at darktowerpod. That's at darktowerpod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. Instagram is darktowerpalaver, all one word, no spaces. And then check out our merchandise. It's tpublic.com/users/darktowerpalaver.
Just drop the Geekery Abides link in the chat if you want to join us over there. We'll be over in a few minutes. We'll be starting that show where we're talking about X-Men. But we will sign off with this episode, as we always do, by saying long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
All right. Thank y'all in the chat. Long days and pleasant nights. You guys all are awesome. Thank you for being part of it. If we see you on the other side, we will see you over there talking about some X-Men.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.